आपके कल
So he's covering the all the images with her right.
एक बार कैमरा में तो देख ले आपको लेफ्ट चल गया कैमरा पता नहीं क्या तेरा उसको
सेटल हो पैसा मारो जल्दी बोल लाइट को पता पैसा बोल
तुम बैठ
सेम
थक जाओ
एपी बिल्स I will call everybody take shots and everyone in the world so that चक्का रहा
यहाँ तक जाएगा अरे भैया भैया
blackout right panel
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to first Wise Summit from powered by VDC Wise. Uh, Thank you so much for everyone to come here, and this is quite a journey which we have shown through the video based. So I would like to speak about a bit about VDC Wise and our complete journey towards how we have been to this level where we are. We started about a year back with VDC Wise, and it was a very small platform, and we didn't know where to go. That like what can be done and how this industry can be disrupted. We had a lot of news publication on the internet, like big publications like Telegraph, Desk, News, BDC. Everyone was doing the same thing. That everyone was trying to create all kind of copying same news on the platforms and giving it away. So we tried something else. We think that okay, we can talk to the industry experts. We can speak with them. We can try to create a whole community of blockchain, bring it all together, and then try to move in a different direction. So from there, we started building a platform. We started as a news publication. Then we introduced Crypto, which is now one of the most famous, interview section which we do. A lot of people come on that platform, and we do quite engagement with them. So we have latest interviewed Mr. Tim Draper. We've also interviewed Mr. Jimmy Song, and so on. So we are growing on the interviews part. Apart from that, we have then kind of introduced Wirecast, which is podcast of BTC Wire. It would be launching in a week time. And then this was the journey where we wanted to connect industry's biggest gap, which was finding out good blockchain startups and getting investments for them. So that was the gap which needed to be filled, and we tried with Wire Summit to do that. So Wire Summit, here it is, and I would really like you guys to go through the whole thing, and would be very happy to see you. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to Wise 2018 Best Edition. Thank you for the quick intro, Jatin. Next up on stage, we have Kathy Go, founder of Dunia Labs. So I'd like to call you.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? I'm not a morning person, so I was super delighted when they put me first. Can you guys get my PowerPoint up, please? Well, I'm Kathy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dunya Labs. We're a blockchain knowledge company based in Bangalore, working on some exciting things. And what I want to talk to you guys today is primarily about mass adoption and how potentially we can see the trajectory of mass adoption of blockchain applications. So I'll start whenever I get my slides up. Okay, so instead of just standing here and saying nothing while I wait, maybe we'll do some interactive sessions. So how many people here are new to blockchain? Anyone? Oh, one brave guy. Hello, sir. More people admitting as they see early guys, good. Who here is running a blockchain company? Blockchain leader? Okay. How many of these companies only do blockchain? Just curious. Oh, one guy. Very nice. Okay, hello. Excellent. How many people here are investors in this space? Okay. Interesting. Cool. So, I guess while we wait, I can talk to you guys a little bit more on Dunya. I just didn't want to focus on it because later people will talk more about a specific company. But our thesis is that we think India is very exciting. It's exciting from an adoption standpoint. There's a huge population here of users that we think can consume decentralized applications and have real use cases and real drivers for wanting privacy preserving, censorship resistant type applications that blockchain enables. We also think there's a great supply pool here, developers that are able to be trained and work on this, although right now the uptake is a little bit disappointing, right? Only 0.2% of India's 5 million developers have any exposure to blockchain, and we see this as a serious bottleneck to actually being able to create a market here. But from both the supply side and the demand side, as well as from India's growth trajectory and India technology in general, we're very bullish, and that's why we've built kind of a international and unique team that's focused on kind of being in India and building applications that have to do with blockchain. So that's a little bit about us. What do you guys want out of this conference today? And you can just shout it out. Nobody knows what they want. Classic. Yeah. What did you say? Sorry.
They know what they want. They just don't want to tell you.
Oh, wow. Well, that's honest, so that's good. Cool. Don't we all? Don't we all? Sorry about the technical difficulties. Sure. So what is Dunya Labs doing? One of the reasons why I decided to focus on this mass adoption trend is that, Dunya Labs' long-term goal is building powerful, scalable blockchain applications for an Indian market. But there's a couple bottlenecks to doing that right now, right? And the primary one is on the technology front. So far, the technology is still not scalable. User experience on blockchain applications is very frustrating. If you look at kind of the dearth of Ethereum over the past 3 years, the issue is that people had a lot of ideas, but when they actually interacted with these dApps, they were expensive, they were extremely slow, they were unfriendly to use. You had to, essentially have a lot of understanding of blockchain and how to manage your private keys, how to download MetaMask, et cetera, et cetera. So outside a very small group of early adopters, it was very impractical to bring this technology to the masses, right? So that a normal person who's just using Facebook or using Twitter will also suddenly be using a dApp. The only way that we're going to see this mass adoption is if we build technology that bridges and abstracts away the fact that blockchain is actually part of the application, right? It shouldn't be so obvious for bad reasons why an application is blockchain based. Oh, it's so slow, it must be blockchain. Oh, it's so expensive, it must be blockchain. Hello? Thank you. So one of the things that we're currently working on is primarily building middleware infrastructure and middleware tooling that helps abstract away some of these issues. How can we make it from a user perspective that they don't know when they're using a dApp that they're using a dApp? How can we help developers who come from traditional backgrounds build on blockchain protocols without having to completely learn a new language, learn a new mode of thinking, because it takes a very specific mindset to be able to code good dApps, and there's not good information or on-ramping, et cetera, right? So that's what we're focusing on right now. We have a couple. It's not blockchain as a platform. I think blockchain as a platform is allowing for different people to spin up their various private blockchains. We have our thesis about private blockchains that we can discuss in person, but we're saying there's very exciting public blockchain protocols, some of which are released, some of which are yet to be released and will be released in the next year. And how can we leverage that momentum to make sure that developers and users are able to use dApps as seamlessly as possible? And we mostly build products with a pretty traditional business model, right? It's B2B, because again, a lot of it is focused towards developers and making dApps more accessible. And we're a great believer that thinking up of good business models on blockchain is very important, as opposed to, let's say, just adding a token and calling it a business model. So that's kind of what we're working on right now. We also do a lot of community building events around India. If you think about public blockchain, oh yay, they did it. Woo! Go VDC Wise team. Thank you. Sorry guys for that delay, and we can get started. So my talk is on blockchain and the path to mass adoption. I think we're all wondering, when is blockchain and by extension, maybe when are crypto assets going to really see the momentum that was growing and now maybe is receding a bit. And I want to talk about primarily from a technology perspective. So there's 3 phases to mass adoption that we've been seeing in the blockchain trajectory. The first has been, application-specific blockchains. So this starts with Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin's power is that it created a censorship-resistant, fully electronic digital cash. And this combined a distributed system where essentially you had different computers storing the same information and decentralized consensus, which means that whatever is on those computers is determined not by one organization, but an independent set of self-interested entities. It's not dictated in a centralized way like a company like Dropbox tells you what's the actual information on that distributed system, right? So Bitcoin is very interesting, and I think the use case is specifically, can you create a digital currency, which is, again, not controlled by any centralized entity, but the issuance and the maintenance of that currency network is by people and independent nodes that, completely don't coordinate with one another. And that's extremely powerful. And we've seen Bitcoin since 2008, really be motivated by the failure of centralized systems like banks, like, centralized financial systems in general. And then we kind of saw the incoming of different, kind of application-specific blockchains. Steemit is a social media blockchain. BitShares is a decentralized exchange blockchain protocol, and et cetera. And then people decided, what if we could create a blockchain which generalizes and creates a general purpose platform where the censorship-resistant, decentralized consensus properties of something like a Bitcoin or a Steemit or a BitShares could be generalized to any type of arbitrary logic, right? And that was essentially Ethereum's large ambition. can we decentralize all and represent all types of contracts in the world on a decentralized network? And contracts, again, strike at something that's at the heart of society, right? Money is at the heart of society, but contracts are also at the heart of society. Our employment is a contract. Companies are essentially sets of contracts. If you think about it, our world is essentially run by these, and if that can be disintermediated or at least autonomously represented on a decentralized network, how is the world going to change? Next slide. But the problem is the only killer dApp on Ethereum so far has been the ICO, right? And so basically we had this grand vision of how do we create a decentralized network to autonomously represent all contracts. And instead people decided to use it to raise a lot of money, sometimes for good things, sometimes for less good things. And that's what we've seen as Ethereum's killer viral application, right? And this was a little bit problematic because it drove a lot of investment interest. It drove a lot of capital infusion, which is very important for the mass adoption of any frontier technology. But the issue is that there was a mismatch between where the technology was and the amount of capital that was flowing in, right? People were saying, oh, this is like the dot-com boom and blockchain, et cetera. But really, the investment speculation was kind of at dot-com boom levels. Not quite, it was only about 10% of that volume. But let's say it was at least significantly higher, whereas the technology was more at like TCP/IP stage, So I always tell people that it was kind of this interesting combination where you had this investment outpouring, but there was no matching momentum on the technology side. And then because this was a completely unregulated industry, there's a lot of governance issues, there's a lot of, in general, these types of issues, which has kind of added to a lot of noise, but we see that dying down, right? And we see regulation becoming more clear. We see, governments like Singapore, Hong Kong, Malta, putting out very clear regulatory frameworks for how people should be doing these issuances. Capital raising, I'm not saying ICOs are bad. I think ICOs are great. They definitely disrupt the heart of what it means to essentially fundraise for technology companies that are decentralized, but it can't be the only thing that's going on, right? Okay, next slide. So Ethereum was a proof of concept, and Ethereum's killer dApp was the ICO. But when Ethereum wanted other types of decentralized applications to essentially go live on their platform and also reach a certain type of momentum, they faced a lot of technology-based issues, right? And the issue is that with decentralized networks, it's much easier to launch a new thing altogether than to change an existing protocol, because an existing protocol already has a lot of vested interest. You require like a complicated governance system. You have to get buy-in from token holders, investors, core developers, etc. And the Ethereum scaling roadmap has been slowed, I think, by some of these governance issues, but also maybe by certain issues with the way that they've structured their team. We don't have to speculate about why, but at the end of the day, Ethereum has been around for 3 years and they haven't been able to implement any scaling solution, right? So right now, if you try to build on Ethereum, you're building on a network that only allows for 13 transactions per second. You're building on a system that has super high latency. So if you're trying to bring an application to users, just think about that, right? One application itself, CryptoKitties, everyone talks about this, but was able to clog the entire Ethereum network. So how are you going to have a bunch of decentralized applications running on this network at scale? That's a major issue, and that's something that has, I think, slowed the adoption of dApps. Next slide. So our question, right? How do we get to mass adoption? Next slide. One thing that I want to say is that unpredictable timescales for these kind of frontier technologies is the norm and not the exception. One story I always like to tell is that at the advent of the World Wide Web, many people thought that AI would be one of the first killer use cases of this technology. Microsoft actually came out with an AI-based, very primitive, but office assistant, almost in 2002. But if you look at the technology lifecycle since then, AI has gone through multiple waves of commercialization, optimization, where people are optimism, where people are like, it's ready, we're going to commercialize it. Increasingly, it's a part of our daily lives, right? Invisible to us, but AI, machine learning, et cetera, runs on the back ends of a lot of our applications. And it's also gone through massive waves of pessimism, where essentially the only people working on it were academic researchers, et cetera, and the commercialization side was very slow. So unpredictable adoption timescales for foundational technology is the norm, not the exception. So let's all be patient, I guess. It's not going to happen super soon. One thing that I think is very interesting about crypto networks and open decentralized networks is that you can think about mass adoption as having two phases, right? The first phase is the product, the network, trying to create entrepreneur and developer mindshare fit. So this is when the process where decentralized networks are trying to attract entrepreneurs and trying to attract technologists to build on them, right? The second phase is actually the product user fit, where essentially applications that these entrepreneurs and developers build will actually be connected to end users. So the reason why you want to think about decentralized networks as having and blockchain protocols as having these two phases is that it's not run by a single company, right? Usually you don't need product entrepreneur developer fit because somebody starts a company and then they say this is what we're going to work on, and et cetera, et cetera. But public blockchains or decentralized networks, nobody's essentially commanding anybody to work on it. But one of the exciting things is that crypto assets and crypto networks have incentives built in, right? So if you look at a lot of these protocols, Ethereum, EOS, Definity, public blockchains that are coming out and trying to attract entrepreneur developer mindshare fit. One of the things that they have in their arsenal is they have lots of capital, right? Most of these protocols have started ecosystem funds where essentially they're trying to fight for developer mindshare and try to get entrepreneurs to build on their networks by, let's say, funding them or giving them technical support or giving them the branding they need. Consensus is essentially, kind of the stage one arm of the Ethereum network, right? And Ethereum thus far, its greatest strength, despite some of the technology failings, is mainly on the side that they have huge developer mindshare. They have over 500,000 developers across the world meeting up, trying to understand it and trying to build on it. So we're at a kind of like medium/mature stage of the first phase, which is how do these decentralized networks incentivize entrepreneurs and developers to work on them? And I travel a lot to the US to keep an eye on what's going on there, and I see very, very exciting things. People from traditional domains moving into blockchain, people from very exciting product companies that are trying to build and incorporate the blockchain. So entrepreneur and developer mindshare fit is definitely happening, and that's a really exciting thing. But phase two, what connects this kind of first phase with products actually fitting end products and end users growing together is something we haven't seen yet. But one of the things that I'm optimistic about is that it might happen faster than we imagine because, again, public blockchain networks are armed with incentives, right? They're able to disperse capital, they're able to build on a base of early adopters. And so on either side, I think that in blockchain, the thesis is that it will be faster than other technology life cycles, but we also have to be patient. Okay, next slide. So the massive adoption trajectory, right, usually starts by innovators or early adopters, moves on to early majority, and then the majority, and then the laggards. So where are we right now? Like I said, there's a mismatch between the investment and the technology usage, right? From an investment perspective, we probably already hit early majority. There's 10 million users on Coinbase. If you look at the asset class, it's still relatively small, but at least the media attention and the retail participation was quite high. So I would say that on the awareness of crypto assets and investment side, we definitely are kind of past early majority stage. But the technology is still really being built by innovators and early adopters. And we see that changing, but it's going to take some time before we reach, late majority or even the majority. Okay, next slide. But I think that one thing that's really important is that if we really want to see blockchain mass adoption, nothing will matter without utility-generated products for users. I think that a lot of people who are in this space are frustrated by price, or frustrated by different things, but the main thing that I always tell companies is that if you build a killer product, none of these things will matter, right? Because users will come, people will come, because your product actually offers something that is utility-generating, and that's how you'll survive as a business. One product that I really like to bring up is Brave, right? Brave is essentially a private browser that's being built by one of the original guys behind Mozilla as well as JavaScript. And Brave has utilities for people who don't even understand blockchain, right? It's 10x faster than Chrome or Safari. It blocks all of your ads automatically. It blocks all trackers and ad blockers and cookies on any of the pages. So to normal users, you just create, especially for mobile users, because you spend a lot of money actually downloading and watching ads from your data plans that you don't even want to be a part of, right? So it creates, separate from blockchain, a completely really good product that anyone would use even if they knew nothing about blockchain. The blockchain part of Brave is the BAT token. So what the BAT token does is trying to reinvent the relationship between browsers and web browsers and users on the internet and advertisers and publishers. And the idea is that rather being forced kind of intermittently as we scroll through the web of having to look at all these ads, users should be paid and should choose how to spend their attention. and should essentially either give contributions to content they like and spend a lot of time on, or have advertisers bid for their attention, right? But what I like about Brave is that, you don't have to know anything about blockchain to use their core product. You don't have to change your behavior to understand it. You don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops to even use it. Because the thing is, what we saw during the ICO boom is many projects believing that if they tokenized an existing business, they would get a lot of users or they would survive, right? But social incentives take much longer to change, I think, than people in this industry believe. And it will only be spurred by genuine product market fit in existing paradigm. We have to ease people into the idea of tokenization. We have to ease people into the idea of what are these token models and how they change relationships between users and applications. I don't think it means that people are going to start using a decentralized application and immediately be like, oh, I understand this entire incentive system, so I'm going to change my behavior. That will be slow, and that will be only won if we slowly give them access to it by offering a core product that in and of itself is abstracted from blockchain and is providing real utility. This is probably the key point if there's any point to be taken from this talk. Okay, next. So what we need from stakeholders, right now in blockchain, specifically in public blockchain, we have more investors and developers and more developers and users, right? And only when this pyramid inverts will we be able to have mass adoption. Next slide. What we need from the technology is primarily on three fronts. The first is obviously scaling. There's people that are scaling from a horizontal perspective, introducing parallelism and parallel processing into public blockchains. There's people scaling from an interoperability perspective. If you have a bunch of chains that are able to talk to one another, even if you have lower throughput on one, you connect all of them, you can support all applications. That's horizontal scaling. And you have people scaling through different consensus algorithms, right? Dfinity's random beacon, faster ways of generating randomness, faster ways, etc. And then there's also a lot of layer 2 solutions. If you look at Ethereum, the Raiden, the Plasma, all of these different projects that are saying, can we just route transactions on a base chain, but still have higher chains which are more governed for transactions. And obviously scaling is very obvious for mass adoption. If you have networks that don't scale, the applications won't work, users get frustrated, you don't get adoption. From a privacy standpoint, it's also very important because for many use cases, completely public or pseudonymous transactions is just not comfortable for users, right? So people looking into zero knowledge, people looking into different types of ways of incorporating privacy-preserving technologies onto public blockchains will be very important. How are you going to be able to build on public blockchains in sensitive areas like health or education if that data, or at least those transactions, are going to need to be semi-released or traceable through technology? People won't like that. And the third thing is governance. Governance governs how, governance is about how do we make decisions about public networks that aren't controlled by companies that have various stakeholders. So as protocols need to be updated, because software needs to be as flexible as possible, right? There's always going to be bugs, there's always going to be upgrades. And how do these decentralized networks coordinate those changes is very important to them surviving as well. What's exciting about next year is that many new protocols that are super exciting are launching their mainnets, their testnets, and they're very much quickly iterating and trying to solve these issues. So we're going to see an extremely competitive, I think, public protocol space. But we have to also be careful that these are all still experiments under progress. Next. And the other side is the developer side, right? We really need lots of smart developers to be working on this in order for more applications to be pushed out and, essentially this path to mass adoption. There's already a lot of demand for blockchain talent, and there's a couple of bottlenecks, right? There's insufficient educational content. It's a fragmented space because if you want to work on different chains, you have to have different skills. For one chain, you might need to know Solidity. For another chain, you might need to be pretty familiar with C++. For another one, functional languages are pretty popular around chains as well. So how do you get developers to be able to work across blockchains, or do it has to be chain specific? That's a problem that hasn't been solved yet. In general, there's pretty poor documentation and tooling outside the Ethereum ecosystem. And information in general is very fragmented, right? It's on Reddit, it's on Telegram. Because these, again, aren't networks that are being launched by centralized companies where they put together all the documentation and they publish it, and there's Linus in the background kind of being a benevolent dictator updating all of the changes. These are open source networks that, again, are decentralized in their very production. So the educational content is still getting there, and we think that in India there's a lot of opportunity to work on this, right? There's a huge developer community, and there's very little upskilling in terms of what's going to be the future of blockchain. There's a lot of people working on Hyperledger, there's a lot of people working on Ethereum here, well less, mostly Hyperledger honestly, maybe because IBM has offices here and has their own workforce here. But I think that making the Indian ecosystem aware of what types of skills will actually happen in the revolutionary paradigm of blockchain is super important, and we would like to see more people doing this work. Thanks. And lastly is from the user side, right? I've already kind of hinted at this, but the only way to get users to actually interact with blockchain applications, you're going to need to abstract away the fact that they're using blockchain, right? The key thing is the blockchain part needs to be invisible. Private key management is a huge issue. People constantly losing their keys, not understanding how to manage their keys. Better UX, right? Just because you're a blockchain application doesn't mean that's an excuse to have poor UX. And free usage of networks. Like right now, we have a lot of public blockchain networks with the gas model. How do you actually create and utilize that gas model so that transactions for users are free, right? They're used to that. We're used to using very fast, very beautiful, very simple applications on our phones or on the internet, and they're all free. Why would we change? Why would that user behavior change just because of blockchain? Next. So there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about on the macro trends angle, right? So because it's not just going to be within blockchain itself, what is actually going to expedite or stop the mass adoption on more of a macro scale? We see some big drivers on the left here. Demand for privacy, right? Privacy becoming increasingly a concern for consumers. Hacks of, hacks of places like, hacks of systems like Facebook, like Equifax, sorry. These things are creating more consumer demand for privacy and data privacy preserving solutions. And we also see this in regulation, right? Europe just passed the GDPR. In general, both governments as well as consumers are becoming more worried about how are these centralized applications and centralized organizations using, storing, and collecting my data. The second is failure of centralized systems. Currency systems, right? In Venezuela, we saw a lot of people moving into crypto because their centralized currency was failing. So how do we see some of these failures translate into, adoption and awareness of decentralized systems? The rise of P2P. If we think about companies like Airbnb, like Uber, they've completely reshaped social behavior, right? The idea now is that if you have any unused asset, you can rent it out in a peer-to-peer fashion. These companies don't provide services, they provide a platform. And what that platform does is primarily matching, reputation management, and dispute resolution. It's just it's more of like a management of these functions as opposed to actually providing a service. And peer-to-peer is very, much the vision of blockchain. And lastly, the evolution of open source and kind of in general, if you look at the greater trajectory of the history of the internet and in general web-based technology stacks, the push towards open source. And can the data storage and data collection part of the internet also be open source with time? But there are also some things that might be dampers, right? The first is global recession. I think a lot of people have the mistaken belief that crypto assets or these types of tokens that power the crypto ecosystem are recession hedges. They're not recession hedges, right? They're inflation hedges. And since they're extremely risky assets, as we've seen in the past couple of months, I think one of the biggest drivers of the sell-off in crypto has primarily been bad macro, right, on the global recession scale. The second is regulation. How fast are regulators going to understand this technology, and how far are they going to go to really champion its success? Are they going to be very slow in understanding it? Are they going to allow for crypto assets? Are they going to monitor it, or et cetera, right? The third I've talked about a lot, which is the tech. And the fourth is legacy social behavior, which I've already touched upon. I think the Indian regulatory system is interesting. I think they're taking kind of a conservative path, but we definitely see a lot of understanding, right? I think that it's maybe not in the public domain, but at least in the conversations that I've had, I've seen serious government officials travel to East Asia to understand how those economies are treating this technology. And there's definitely a desire in the Indian ecosystem not to make the same mistakes as the internet, right? Not to essentially stifle this technology because it's going to bring jobs, it's going to bring capital, and it's going to bring a lot of benefits to the Indian ecosystem. Next. And so Junior Labs, what are we working on? Like I already said, I touched on this first step already. We're building a lot of middleware and tooling that enables dApps to build on public blockchains and bring those applications to users. And we also do some of the education community side, not because it's core to our business model. Actually, we're primarily a product company. But because not many people in the ecosystem are doing it, so we might as well, right? So we just hosted our first Catalyst series, which has to do with having developer-friendly, hands-on workshops that really teach developers and give them the experience of what does it mean to build on a public blockchain network. So this was some pictures from that. This has been a very long-winded talk, so I apologize next time. But I am done. Thank you. Hope you guys learned a little bit about my thesis about. Do I have time? 5 minutes for questions? Okay. Are there any questions about anything I said? You guys got it all. Our office is in Bangalore. Yeah. We also have an office in San Francisco and one in New York for the international remote members. So we have over 15 people now in Bangalore. Yes. Hmm?
Like Airbnb, Uber,
Correct.
changing the behavior.
Correct.
Where do you see the point of where this behavior, where we start trusting strangers more than the centralized system?
Yeah.
Which will bring a larger change.
Absolutely. I think that the sharing economy platform has already changed a kind of behavior, and it rises on demographics. Young users that are more open to new paradigms, users that are familiar with more digitalized platforms as opposed to traditional kind of manual way of doing things. And these will still drive the fact that, especially in India, the demographics here are great. 50% of the population is under the age of 30. We have the massive amount of people coming online, getting interacting with the digital world for the first time. These are important drivers to suggest that different social behaviors will be faster in places with these demographics. But I think that the thing is that what Uber and Airbnb did was they had a great product and they changed social behavior, right? They had a great business model. What I'm seeing sometimes in blockchain is people who don't have the first two and only expect user behavior to change, and that user behavior to almost be the key USP of their business. That doesn't really make sense, right? So that's kind of one more.
Yes. So I have a question. You talked about consensus algorithms. So according to you, what is the best consensus algorithm when it comes to user resources and at the same time you want the faster algorithm? So according to you, which algorithm according to you is the best to report the apps?
That's a good question. Which consensus algorithm will be the best for dApps? I mean, next year is going to be protocol wars, right? So a lot of different consensus algorithms will be fighting out this very question. I've read almost all of the papers for at least novel, I think, and implementable consensus algorithms. There's a couple I'm excited about, but they all have different trade-offs, right? I think Definity's random beacon is extremely powerful, but again, not sure how it scales. I think something like Avalanche is a good consensus algorithm, looking at kind of a fast chain chain and how we can potentially port transactions that need to see which chain and actually run on. I actually think cost is okay, right? A lot of people think that stake is the centralized blah blah. But I think it works and it's a more political process. So it's going to be stuff. I think is most consensus and they're going to have to find out in the market, which will be very exciting. I was actually hosting protocol. We're all trying to get out of the market, but what if they also fought it out, boxing would be a way to reach that. Okay, thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Very sorry. Next, we have our Mr. J.H. Secretary and IT Mr. Government Corporation. We'll be talking about initiative in blockchain.
Good morning. Good morning. I thought so. Presentation for this forum, but after listening to Kathy, I thought let me give my perspective how blockchain is going to be relevant for Indian context. When I joined, I imagined that earlier,
After we sold our company, Photo Play to NVIDIA, that I became the NVIDIA manager and I was running the company. During that time, I got information from government industry. For 3 years back, I joined the government. During the first 1 year, I was not knowing how to promote the IT industry in the new on because because of automation, because of various reasons, the existing IT services industry is going down, and the company, uh, the net is or so in that trying to figure out how to get the companies to on with this. That's when I figured out why don't we focus on the fintech industry. Again, in the fintech industry, what I noticed is fintech today, any conventional bank like State Bank of India, ICICI Bank, the conventional bank, when they're going digital, fundamentally they were using four technology. They were worrying about the cybersecurity. Because of cybersecurity, they're looking at blockchain as a fundamental technology to improve upon. The third one is the data analytics because every bank has got large customer base and they don't know how to manage the data, how to manage the. The last one is the automation, AI and artificial intelligence. Every bank is looking at robo processing all that. So fundamentally, we started FinTech Valley Isaac with these four pillars of the technology. Then I was talking about blockchain about 2 years back in a conference. That time everybody said, no, blockchain is not going to work. Blockchain has got this problem, scaling problem, efficiency problem, and all kinds of things. And many people, they said, blockchain is only relevant for the cryptocurrency. This kind of negative connotations. One of the characters conference chaired by our Honorable Chief Minister, he gave us the mandate because today our government is a paperless, true paperless government. No papers at all. Everything is e-office, everything is e-procurement, our cabinet is e-cabinet, our assembly is e-assembly. We don't use papers at all. And everything is on the digital platform. It's good. Digital platforms are good for eradicating the corruption, improving the efficiencies, all that is fine. But it's a question of, for example, I'll give a sample example. Now we've got a e-procurement portal. Normally in the government, to get any government contract, thousands of crores contracts, whoever is the lowest bidder, we call L1, they get the contract. Now when we have it on the e-procurement portal, if some intelligent person, if he knows how to hack into our portal, find out who is the lowest bidder who already submitted their bids, just before the bid closes this thing, he knows the information. He submits his bid, maybe 1 lakh rupees less or whatever, then he will become the lowest and he will get all the contracts. Like that, there are many issues in the Digital India programs when we are going totally digital. Even though now elections are on the many election process today, they want to use the digital information on the voter database. What if some hacker wants to hack the voter database and changes the this thing? The whole democracy will be a big question mark because we elect our leaders based on the elections, right? So there are a lot of issues in the digital India if you go purely digital. But we have to go digital because as long as we give the discretion powers to the government officers, the corruptions will be there and the efficiencies cannot be this thing. So we have to go digital. So that's where we thought probably blockchain could be one fundamental technology which can help the digital India, particularly digital entrepreneurs. That's when we invited a lot of companies across the globe to come and do some pilots with us. In the last October conference, we had a big blockchain conference. In that, we invited companies from Estonia, companies from Israel, Singapore, all those companies, they came and did some pilots in the land records, in the education space, transportation. That's when we figured out what is possible with blockchain, how we can protect the digital assets because of those pilots. Then afterwards, we ran one simple application. We see these days because of the new technologies and we want to give opportunities for startups. The earlier startups getting into government business, a lot of issues used to be there. Unless This company has got billions of dollars turnover. They are into existence of so many years. Those are the criteria for them to get any business from the government. Today, we want to change that. We're already changing it. So now our model is, whether it's a small company, big company, doesn't matter. They have to go through the hackathon process. During the hackathon process, we really test them whether they really have the technology, whether they can meet all the requirements, all that thing. In fact, recently, there's a big multi-billion-dollar contract. And before we awarded the contract, we ran the hackathon. During the hackathon, surprisingly, multi-billion-dollar companies could not pass these hackathons. Few companies passed. Afterwards, we looked into their financial models and we gave the contracts to them. Similarly, we want to test it out for the blockchain because we want to go ahead and implement blockchain where it's applicable. We have a new capital called Amaravati, which is just taking place in the state of New Andhra Pradesh. It's a greenfield capital. And our chief minister wants to really build new age technologies in the capital of Amaravati. So we wanted to start blockchain, using blockchain in Amaravati. So we wanted to have Amaravati land records put into the blockchain. When we ran the hackathon, one startup company called JB Systems, they passed the hackathon and they implemented the blockchain for the Amaravati land records. Now, because he has implemented the first production version of the blockchain in the state of AP, he is getting a lot of inquiries from other states, from other countries, and that is the kind of opportunity that we are giving to the startups. So definitely, what I see is in the last 3 years, as Kathy was mentioning, a lot of dynamics are taking place in terms of the technology, in terms of the usage of this technology. So whatever was relevant 3 years back, today they are not relevant. There are lots of things are happening. So that's, I feel, it is an advantage for many Indian startups because when the market is not mature, the technology is not mature, this is the best time for the startups to get into that space and see whether we can develop a new platform, new protocols, new implementation strategies. And definitely Digital India, just because of the security element, there's huge opportunities going to play. Every state like Andhra Pradesh, we have to implement billions of dollars because we have to protect the digital assets. We already created the assets, and if you don't protect, people will lose the confidence on the digital systems. So these kind of opportunities are there. I was just reading a news item that AMD, one of the largest the silicon chip companies, just recently they came with a hardware-based blockchain chip where all the GPUs and CPUs, they are connected in a kind of a nodes. They are also giving some kind of software platform for applying those hardware chips to create a blockchain application. So it looks like even hardware companies, chip companies are also embracing blockchain because they see the opportunity for them to sell because of the security reasons and all that. All the banks are already going for blockchain. Insurance companies are trying to adopt. Even healthcare companies, in fact, one startup company who came to Andhra Pradesh, Shivom, they are in the DNA space. So they collect the DNA of every human being. And once you blockchain the DNA, if somebody wants to use, suppose there is a cancer patient and they capture the DNA of the cancer patient. And if there's a blockchain DNA of the cancer patient, if some research company wants to use it, they have to pay per annum some subscription for using that whatever the information. So he says up to $5,000 to $10,000 per annum that individual is going to get because he's allowing the people to use his information, which is blockchain information, is giving the permission. Today, if any Indian citizen goes to any hospital does all kinds of tests on you. They don't give even a discharge summary. They give one small sheet without all this thing. All the information, our health parameters, what tests they have done, everything is with the hospital. You don't know what hospital is doing with that information. Though we call it a lot of privacy issues, where is the privacy issues? And we are not concerned about our own health information leaked out to many research companies. That's where the opportunity for the new startup companies. If only you figure out how you can blockchain that information. Don't allow the hospital to give that information to anybody unless you permit the hospital that yes, by permitting you are going to get some money and your information is not leaked out to the general public and all. I think there's a lot of opportunities what I see for the blockchain technology related companies. I am also heading the standards committee for Bureau of Indian Standards for the blockchain. Recently, I led a delegation to London. There were nearly how many countries were represented in the London, professor? About 20 plus? 110 countries were represented for the blockchain standards committee in London. And we saw a contingent of scientists from China, largest contingent was there from China. And the way they already prepared and they were talking about various protocols to be introduced in the global ISO standards in the blockchain, either the smart documents or whatever the crypto areas and all that this thing. I think India, we are not at all prepared. That's where our committee is trying to see how for the Indian government, we introduce some of the protocols which will go into ISO standards in the blockchain standards so that our interests are also protected. The another thing we are planning to do is because blockchain in the security the area, we can't compromise the state security or individual security. That's where I think there is a opportunity. We requested some of the R&D to prepare our own blockchain stack, like India stack for Aadhaar. So why can't we have our own stack, blockchain stack for India, so that everything is written by Indians for Indian uses? Because if you use some public protocols or whatever, you don't know what are the leakages, security leakages are there. So that's another big opportunity. If Indian government with some R&D institutions, like Hyderabad, to prepare a India stack for the blockchain, for smart smart documents, all that. I think hopefully we will have India stack for the blockchain. Once that kind of platform is available, I think it's a great opportunity for the startup companies. There's applications are there's so many areas blockchain is getting introduced. When the people after me, when I was talking about blockchain 3 years back, today they say yes, blockchain is realizable. Chip also coming to the market. So people are implemented blockchain. I think it's a great opportunity. The presentations are to pass on the presentation to you. And any questions? Let me before I conclude. Recently, we ran $1 million global startup challenge in continent. Why we wanted this global challenge? Because we want best of the best companies to compete for some of the problems that what we have in the state of Andhra Pradesh. So that whoever solves the problems, we get the best companies across the globe to come to our fintech valley. Silicon Valley becomes famous because Silicon Valley attracts the talent from across the globe. That's the reason why we ran this competition. There were about 50 global startup companies who came to the competition, which happened just about 3 weeks back in Wednesday. And these companies are there. Are you coming for just $1 million as a prize money, or is there any other? Most of these companies beyond companies came from Israel, from Paris, London, US, places they were representing. All of them, they said, see, today we see that it is going to be very big market. They don't know how to really capture that market. And because when the government is the main purchaser, there are a lot of. So that's the reason why they wanted to come, because our government headed chief minister, he recently chief minister, and they said that your state, if you're able to access some of the projects of your in the state of Andhra Pradesh, once we do it with you, then whole country, all the states will be able to access the business opportunity. So that's the reason why we have come all the way from US, Hong Kong, and different parts of the globe, come here and see the opportunity and how we can seize the opportunities in digital India. This thing. So that's one. The second one, came from Hong Kong. Said we have the technologies, but we don't have the manpower to implement. Whereas India got very good quality manpower and scale. That's another reason why we want to come here and explore opportunities to create the development, to create the implementation strategy. Tech. These are the primary reasons why coming here at this point of time. So, this is a fund for AP Innovation Fund, whichever the startup is going to Andhra Pradesh, we not only give the business access to them, in fact, we keep calling the 3M strategy. One M is the manpower, create manpower for this new technology. Second is the follow-on funding, money. Third M is the market access. Out of all these three, third M is the most important element because market is required for any company, whether it's a Hong Kong company, Israeli company, wherever they are, market they will die. India is 1.3 billion people, and digital India is just the just initial stage of implementation. I think that this is a very big opportunity. And I was telling Jitin that why don't you run the same conference in Visakhapatnam? We will on VY, right? VTC Wise. And I really admire Jatin. He's a great startup entrepreneur. And within no time is taken Jatin and come to Andhra Pradesh. We will run a much bigger conference generating more than implementing. So, all the best. Any questions? For I want the presentation with the questions. I'll be more than happy to answer. Yes, please.
You talk about government of India creating their own blockchain. My question is that when we talk about each every country's government creating their own blockchain, tomorrow it will be every company creating their own private blockchains. Would it defeat both decentralization from there?
A good question. See, wherever there is a security matters, we have to security. So it's still in the design phase. So we will have no one India stand for the blockchain. Maybe it will have the APIs which will interact with the other blockchain protocols wherever it is required. But more the security elements will be built in our blockchain so that our security is not compromised. Otherwise, if you suppose if I implement say blockchain and record some protocol, because we don't know what leakages are there that this thing. The leakages are found out by somebody because they are publicly all the code everything is available. If somebody can still hack into this thing, then what purpose of just implementing blockchain for taking care of the common citizens? That's why we're working on how to create the India stack for the blockchain. We are still there is this right is taking the lead in that. Maybe Mike is also on that. And definitely there will be interface APIs which will interface with the public. Those things I'm still I'm not a scientist on who's working on that, but we'll let you know. Yes, please.
How do we reach out to the government? Because I think there are a lot of problems in India. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
So there are a lot of problems when I try to reach out to governments in India. Because it's easy for people to reach out to I'm talking to them already than government. How are you helping me? I'm doing something to reach out to government.
It's a good question. Yeah, government reaching out to government, there are a lot of entry barriers, particularly in India. That's where we have unique civil proposition at this point of time. There's a reason why the global survey ease of doing business is number one. It's because of our political head, our chief minister. See, government officers, I worked in government of India, I worked in various this thing. Normally, the power, we want to exhibit our power. how the power will come down. So you come and meet me. Then only I use my discretion and based on that I will, right? Or chief minister, why support face, whether influence person or common sense technology is same for you or anybody, right? So now our tax rate for all invisible government and visible government. So one period of time, there are many nothing you are and get your things processed. In fact, that's a concept he realized in the 90s that introducing the digital technology can eradicate corruption. But what is the thing is people who are applying and again go to the process. Now realizing that is he has introduced real-time governance. That means suppose you apply for some whatever project, the concern of within 40 members is not claim that automatically go to the next option. And all this chief minister, I mean, this all the reports are those chief minister dashboard, which are by officers. So there's a reason a lot of people, many companies, Europe, but other companies are on this. I have several startup companies. Business already now they are getting inquiries from the group and with the thing. So we are and very innovative chief university and the reason why I am from the I am in the government now because I know what industry and I all my report is all from industry. So we don't have the typical government workers working for me. I myself the typical NVIDIA and so that is because really see that the entrepreneurs are and all these issues, whatever you mentioned, are going to be non-issues. Welcome. Somebody. Yeah.
Well, it's very
interesting. Why introduce yourself? You are busy for me. Later on, in touch with me.
I'm a lawyer in the blockchain space. Also happened to be a speaker today. However, it's very intriguing to actually see a government guy speaking on blockchain. The question is that how do you feel when I've had conversations with people in Ministry of Finance and people from RBI, from SEBI, when most people are very tight-lipped about blockchain technology, one state or two states in India, say for example, Andhra Pradesh and maybe Hyderabad, that matter, are very pro-blockchain. So don't you think that actually creates normally with the central government also, and you actually have a global blockchain given the fact that something as Ministry of has promoted with a blockchain, say for example, even my company.
I understand your question. Let me address. First of all, Hyderabad is not. It used to be one time. Now our capital is Amaravati. So in Indian system, each state is independent, right? There are several things which are we have government here. For example, the land registration, there are states. Wherever the state subjects are there, for example, transportation, education, there are states. We without any consultation whatsoever. As long as you bring into some defense related or certain things which have to be enacted, that's where the interface is required. That's where we have to put pressure through our parliamentarians to discuss, to bring some amendments. This thing maybe last like you can help us what are those areas and how we can put some pressure. But many things wherever state is independent, we are going.
We just want to
Sure.
Startup because the value proposition they're offering will happen in 3 to 5 years' time. And if you're not getting support from the central government, maybe out of the 10,000 crore rupees startup fund, and no one that you've got
Whatever fund goes from apart from that, state is creating their own starting fund. Example, they are creating about 500 fund. Right? Already with the time Amaravati engines, whatever time Amaravati engines they invested to start, we are matching that investment already. And now we are structuring a new fund, AP Innovation Fund, which is about 5 crore fund, which will be again available for the startup company. Any more questions? Yeah, please.
So, as you said that every single government of India, how they appreciate it. So, I mean, government of India is very clear about the blockchain, but when it comes to the term cryptocurrency, right, they are very tight. So, so much, hatred towards cryptocurrency term, and I so much, pro about blockchain. And adding to this point, already 5 years back, they, allowed experiments for Bitcoin, right? The whole United States has not. Is there a way that Andhra Pradesh can lead the same way?
No, as far as cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is concerned, RBI, what the country said that, as my friend said, those things have to come from the central government. See why government is on digitizing the crypto. They're not speculating, right? Today, coin price 10x, later on maybe 1x. So we don't want to some areas invest in crypto coins, take the crypto coins. Today is worth 100 or maybe 100 rupees. Tomorrow it may be 1 rupee. Common man and so awareness is not there. It's not good for the industry. That's the reason why they're going so. Okay. No more questions? Thank you. Thanks a lot. Welcome.
Quite an insightful question. Now I'm next on stage, CTO Biotechnologies, and he'll be discussing about blockchain integrated exponential node technology.
No presentation going. It's fine. So I am Suneshwar Singh. I don't know good afternoon currently. It's good morning, right? So it's an honor of this such industry experts and everybody. I don't know who knows blockchain. Let's start. So we take back the I cannot show. And it is basically the chain that we are researching on and we are going to develop this thing kind of development a little bit going on about the development. And mostly so we have done many Ethereum apps and other different chains on your chain and your chain cost. So we have done different things and we are trying to chains and different kind of consensus mechanisms so that we can develop the best that we can for the portion. So blockchain is being the buzz of the decade. Everybody knows this since 2009 in 2019, nearly 2019. This whole decade is about blockchain. And it is the hype word that mostly blockchain startups or mostly startups use to get more funds. That's said by so blockchain, but they want to use the blockchain word and integrate it anywhere in any startup, in anything that they want, right? Now, so now it's Bangalore. So blockchain has been one of the decade as we talked about it, and the mass adoption of blockchain as we are blockchain startup to face some of the problems that we are going to discuss about. Some of them Kathy already discussed. I was listening to that and I thought my slides were exactly same. So fine. So the main reason is that the same thing is happening. Cryptocurrency is needed to be and we need the for the blockchain, right? The cryptocurrency act as a medium of payment, right? But if the cryptocurrencies are being traded, and especially in the 24-hour market, they are going to be especially the people who focus on the trading part, right? And if imagine a country of 1.5 billion people,
मेरे ब्लर हो
this
जाएगा ना
India has 1.5 billion people, and the main source of energy is fuel. If the fuel prices by 40 cents, people go crazy. Everybody starts talking PMN, right? And if they go up by 300, go down by 100, again go up by go down by minus. So nobody will use distributors will take critical losses. The users, the similar thing is with the blockchain. The current thing that for now tech and different kind of that focuses only on the industry, like IBM, RP, and Amazon. Yeah. So they are right because if we try to focus blockchains, they are going to touch everyone's life, but there is still a problem since blockchain developers died. Since blockchain developers where we are going, it is going to cost too much to get your industry out. This small scale, they do not want to enter it just because they do not have knowledge about it. They do not want to start it, right? So only big industries, even they also need to customize their database structures. They need to customize their working style. They need to customize their operations to fit on a specific blockchain that they want to use. Correct? So at time, first of all, we respect the freedom. We are trying to develop currently in the research mode. We are trying to develop a blockchain that can adjust according to the users. They have the freedom if they want it public, private permission, if they want to share the data on public, still keeping it to stay like verifiable blockchains, like if you talk about unique identification for India. If we can manage the things like your name, your phone number, the basic things that you can create the phone number, your Aadhaar number, and hash it. That's why I guess that was there. Go into technical details. But still, if you hash it, you get a single hash that can be verified if the same data is passed again. But you cannot take it back or you cannot reverse the hash. Right? So this can be a verifiable document shared on the public part. You do not have to open the API to directly your database to confirm this. So these type of customizations will be available in Bind that we are trying to develop. Again, the another feature of Bind will be nested sidechains, right? So nested sidechains. Currently, Ethereum is working on sidechains, but the problem with public blockchains is that they are already so much in pressure about hard forks and soft forks that if they want to develop something better, if they want to change some of the database structures and everything, they will again go into a hard fork, which most of the community again for the trading purposes, someone rejects, someone accepts, just for raising the price and getting like 2 coins, two different coins in their wallet. So again, it's for a already settled blockchain, already distributed blockchain. It is very hard to go for to do these kind of changes, right? But we are starting, and we can already we can start we can integrate it from the starting part only. So the nested sidechains will be to handle multi-level organizations, to handle government organizations like there is a like there are hierarchy of basically officers that control the data. Each side chain can have their own different style of consensus, right? So we are basically the main chain will be working on DPoS. Again, I will look at the avalanche. So the main consensus till now was DPoS, and we are working on a modified version of it, a little bit modified. There will be two different kind of parts: a single party consensus, a multi-party consensus, depending on the multi-level organization change, right? So if there is a single party that can authorize all the transactions or do the things, it will go for a single party consensus. That means he or she will be elected by the vote of board members, or let's not go into technical details. So basically, it's a single party consensus, multi-party consensus for different kinds of side chains. Each chain will have a different side chain, and that will be totally independent because it has the freedom to choose. If they want it, they can support the main chain. If they do not want it, they won't support the main chain. But then they will have to be an intranet. They will have to support only their own chain, and they cannot interact with the main chain again. If they want to interact with main chain, the only exception is that they will have to support the main chain and their own chain. Rest of the chains, if they want to support, it's their choice, right? So that's why we are calling it as solution node technology, because each and every side chain created will increase the number of nodes in our side, our main chain, and that will increase the security as well. Each the added advantage I can say that we are trying to build task specific sets of blockchains predefined so that we can provide an UI for small scale industries so that they can directly take their business from zero to one blockchain with few clicks only. So we are trying to develop an UI based thing for that, UI based structure for all the task specific blockchains, and there will be an API or endpoints open for each and every task so that any coder from any different, like they have already talked about Solidity. That if you want to code on Ethereum, you have to use Solidity or the Python thing, Parity. So they have already talked about it, so that each blockchain has their own language, each blockchain has their own virtual machine that converts the language. But we are trying to develop so that we can open endpoints so that any other programming language person who codes in another language can connect to our blockchain very easily. So that there is no language barrier for any other industry, or there is no development barrier for any other industry. There is no, it will be cost specific because most of the like Node.js, Java developers are very cost effective, and you can find them easily. Instead, if you want to go for searching for a blockchain developer, it's going to cost too much. It's not easy to find, and you must have the knowledge of blockchain to even test your knowledge. So, I guess if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Now we'll have a panel discussion, so just hold on a second. We'll just set it up everything. Now I would like to call on stage Mr. Abhishek Kishore Gupta, KPMG partner in India. We'll be moderating this panel session with Giacomo Arcaro and Giovanni. And the topic of discussion is decentralized future.
Good afternoon. Last session was in the morning. I have two esteemed panelists with me today. But I think what we decided in the morning is we'll change the theme altogether. And what we will talk about is how and where we can use the world which they have seen, which is more around crypto, ICOs, STOs, and how to make that more relevant for all of us in this room to apply and think about those in a much more innovative way. So first of all, I would like my panelists to introduce themselves because they have been in this field and doing STOs, ICOs across the world and have seen quite a lot. And if I introduce them, that will be a bit of injustice. So over to Giacomo.
Yeah. Hi everybody. I'm Giacomo Arcano from Italy. Really thank you for inviting me in this event. So we've been traveling the world in the last 4 months by following a lot of events from Singapore to Dubai, US, and it's the best world we could have visited by India. We really love it. And well, I'm a growth hacker, so I teach university in Europe about growth hacking. We'll talk about this later. And I'm an investor and advisor on ICO Bench. So we help ICO, STOs, and startup blockchain to raise funds to be more viewable, to be noticed and spotted by investors. I advise about 50 ICOs so far.
Jerry. Hi everyone, I'm Giovanni from Italy. I'm here from not like me. As Giacomo, I'm a grown-up and in the marketing world from 20 years and from 5 years in the crypto world. And yes, I'm also advisor in a lot of projects, ISO Dance and the other crypto website. I'm advising
तो भी आ रहा है ना जो आती पे सब कर ले दो अपना ही
Okay, so now let me start with as you heard, Robert Mazda is representing a couple of others. So, more or less, let's speak about India because of the regulations and so not having any securities in the brand, and hence India is across the world, quite a number of restrictions which are happening. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to learn the good practices, the basic practices. The second thing is, I want to ask from both of you. We always will ask more questions from you. We always used to look for questions from you. Yeah.
The nice shows made by parents and So I don't know why, but it's like we are going through all of the
What have you seen as a trend happening in ICU? How is it evolving? Are there any specific geographies that are evolving? Are there type of regulations that are evolving? Let us throw some light on some of the trends from you guys. What are the trends in ICU?
So, the last month, I think the improvement in the ICO. The total we have just now the world more than 500,000 ICO. Not Africa. In the last month, we saw more than 5,000 going. The world, the best the first one where almost it's always a mistake. A lot of people mistake that. Anyway, it's about this regulation. Yeah, but regulation is, I think they are the best three. Singapore, Canada, and Switzerland. I don't like Switzerland.
In part of things we would say that ISO is dead and so on. We are facing the biggest part of the ICO community this month, plus 20% of ICO field in the last month. This is not, and also in funds, also in funds. Yeah, but it's not, yeah, plus 50%. Plus 50%. But it's not investment from public offer, but more from investment firms. That's why we have signed agreements with private investment firms, because they are the ones who will be investing in that space.
And where do you see the battle between STO and ICO heading to? I can see there are two parts of the world now. One who promotes and propagates STOs, security tokens versus ICOs. What's your point of view on that particular battle?
Okay, definitely ICOs is going to change forever because investment firms do prefer the STO because ICOs are dominated by KPMG and the other one. So everybody is searching for KPMG advisors because investors are more likely to be investing into STOs advised by guys like you. And well, the trend is an hybrid from ICOs to STOs, and I think will be next an hybrid between STO and IPO. Even if well, like, because ICO has been deleted from it's going to be deleted from Switzerland. You can do it in Italy, you can do it in India too. And what STOs costs a lot because we are talking about $500,000 just to start from the scratch. And the compliance legal one it costs half a million. But I think it's gonna be the STO is gonna be the near future.
So, what do you think? The portfolio mix of the ICO investment is emerging, right? What type of company, what type of startup? I heard a lot about reverse ICOs now. So, what do you think your mix of the ICOs changing to from where it started and where it is heading?
Yeah, you use the diversification of portfolio from investment funds according to industries, different industries. So what's the industries?
The type of industry, I think that I like analytics. And
data and analyze a lot of things about this work. So about the industry, also the best is the type of platform. So there are a lot of projects this type of focus with platform. And also the project like anything and is the first three last week. I think the next future will also. Yeah, because yeah, also with the last year, investment funds is creating like crypto investment funds more reliable, more trustable for investors, so they can really see where the money is going. Right. So if you give them about 1,000 Ethereum, you can track what the Ethereum is going for which company, and those companies will be publish the turnover month by month, day by day, hour by hour, and you can check your money in which company is going and how much you raised or you lost. Depends.
So, what are the next question is about twofold. One is, what are the ingredients of a successful ICO RST?
Yeah, we will discuss this outside. Yeah, I will discuss this. Yeah, there's three ingredients. You want to do that? Then I will. Yeah, yeah. The ingredients are pretty simple. The first one is to select the correct advisory board, the right one, like from the teacher did. No, I cannot. No, select the right advisory board. The second one is marketing growth hacking. The third one is investment funds. Let me explain a little bit of these uh, 3 points.
Explain the first one.
The first one, because he's the boss, he is the European boss. So go ahead.
No, no, not just for me or for Zach. It's important. Example, we have a project in Italy. We don't have only Italian advisory support, but also is important international advisor because all the advisor can do something. The advisor can improve your legal, or other advisor can improve your technical, or an advisor will improve marketing or growing, like me and Zach. And yeah, advisor can do a lot of things. And of course, in other countries, it's important. It's like example in India, like from the kitchen project. There are advisors also in this whole country. It's important, but like this project, me and Giacomo are advisor, international advisor. It's important around the world.
All over the world. Yes, that's because also we are in secret Telegram groups with all the experts from SMS, holder, and so on. So once we found out a good project and we advise them, that is, we just spread the voice among the experts. We are about 500 experts. Every expert and their advisor has got a special skills. One in growth hacking, one in investment funds, one in conferences. So it is important to select an advisor not only for the bits and right things that I mentioned by July, but also because it's a kind of group of people helping you through this jungle.
So the secret lies in the right network.
Yeah, you actually said network is your network. Yeah. And the other thing is growth hacking, I will explain later. And the last one is investment funds. But you will find investments, not only because you have a good project, but mostly because you have a good team, including advisors. And that's the thing. We suggest to our investment funds project, and they do believe in us. So we have invested about
5 million so far in the last 4 months because our investment proves to believe that. So it's much more important
That was the key ingredients of the success of the ICO. What about if a country or a nation want to start allowing ICS? What are your learnings from Malta, Singapore? How can someone start legalizing quite a lot of these things? What are the steps to move towards that?
Yeah. That's it's like yeah. We'll share with you right prices to build up a nice year with a small amount of money. Go ahead. Yeah, the first one is going to be small, Malta, because we stayed in Malta 1 month ago, and we saw incredible world. We were about 15,000 people, things like that, in a small blockchain summit. Yeah, it's more simple. It's not difficult to join as a SEO like that. And that's exactly the price is not too high. The price is for for the age. 48,000 including legal compliance, PPNG. Yeah, I know that it costs 1,000, but no, in Malta it costs pretty less than other countries. Yeah, and you can open. In other countries, think it's more high. It's higher. I mean, in Switzerland it's about 100,000. That's for the capital of the company, and then about $200,000 for the rest. And in Malta, you will open a banking account in fiat currency, so you can change Ethereum you have collected into fiat, and you are in a EU economy.
Yeah, yeah, a part of the EU. Right. So, which are tell us about some of the most innovative ICO or the companies which where you have been part of it. Which are the most innovative use cases you have seen where you have kind of helped them, advised them?
So the most innovative, I got a couple. I can't say the ICO here, but no. Well, I found out a really good project. It's not an ICO, but its name is 8Pay. They is creating a crypto PayPal to split payments. So in the near future, the smart contract is really done. You can pay the employers by the second, and you will see the wallet increasing second by second. So it just prints the card entering and exiting from the job. They will start the exit 2 seconds after they print it. Or you can pay Spotify by, yeah, it's another project is Bitson. In Italian, for Italian project because we like too much this Italian project. And yes, it's the first decentralized music platform. Yes, the same Spotify, but in blockchain. Right. So it's very. It's where the royalty gets split automatically, and then for the yeah. The hash also encrypts the data. Yeah. You will pay. It's like Tata 2 for Netflix. You will pay the artist based on the seconds you listen to the music. Exactly. So it's going to disrupt Spotify. Yeah, I think that all the platforms like Netflix, Spotify, iTunes, it's going to be disrupted by blockchain. Centralized platforms. Yeah, because I can't imagine the world without it's still going on the centralization because it makes no sense, have no sense. So I've got all my answers free of cost. So I'll open the floor for you guys. If you guys have any questions, you can ask the experts, on that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. This is a really good question. We'll repeat. Okay, advice. What's your name? Abhishek. Do you pronounce it right? Abhishek. Okay. What Abhishek asked is, okay, advisory is important, but what about the okay. So we are also changing for shifting projects, basically. Okay. We are changing for fresh projects and by having the community to get rid of them. So once the fresh project, the crack project came to us, we just started to do the old isolating website and get rid of that. But if you have a good project and you have good advisors, you can survive from the top. We got all a lot of projects that got good reviews, 90% to 100% of good reviews. But if the project is not good, we don't came on. It will not came on board. So we don't bring all the projects on board because otherwise, websites is like ICO bench, ICO holder, and so on. If you take on board like advisor with a prep project, you will be put down by the rating. So it's not convenient for us, even if they pay.
Definitely, the idea is the key. But yes, getting the right set of advisor after getting the right idea is the second best step. He was answering more from the advisor's point of view.
Yeah, IT because our investment firms from Dubai, Switzerland, and Italy and UK are looking for team inside it. Yeah, if you have good track record, you have sold your first startup, or you have done something good in your past life and your track record, they will be more willing to invest in you than another agent or SEO. But
Any other questions? Then we are good.
yeah.
Uh, my name is Pushkar.
Pushkar.
Being an ex Wall Street banker, etc., my past life, I'm always sort of a little confused. Maybe a little slow. Okay? But I'm confused most times with what's happening. But like anybody else, I want to get excited about it, want to get into it, right? Where does the ICO, the STO, where and how does it, what are the boundaries between where the SEC, etc., start wanting to get involved versus not wanting to get involved? Where is that borderline? How do you watch the process? What do you have to be careful about? Where does the national security, where's the crossover? Where's the crossover? Where does it in fact become a crime? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that's something.
Yeah, we would like to know this as well, but no, this government. No, government is thinking about that. As the U.S. government just fine two ICOs to get money back to all the investors. No one of us knows why, but if the government say that, you have to do that. But there's no boundaries. Our Telegram group with investors is named Chain West because it's like the old West, and we don't know. Well, we're just waiting for the SEC regulations once for all, the China regulation, and once the US will regulate it, we will uh, we will see what happens. But I do believe that if no government will do any regulation and Amazon will launch its own crypto Amazon currency, or Facebook or Apple, we will be all, but no, we, but government will be, yeah, that word. Like,
If these guys launch their own currency,
yeah.
then people
Yeah, 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 yeah. So we have to wait. There's lots of news every day about regulation, but so far there's some countries against ACOs, some countries against STOs, and some countries willing to accept the STO. But if you build in Malta, you can accept money from everywhere, or Singapore or Switzerland. So, but the problem with the STOs that you can trade your token in exchanges because there's no exchanges available for STOs. And another problem to be solved is if I buy, I don't know, Amazon STO or a company like BTC Wire STO, and I buy 2% of the shares, 2% shares of the BTC Wire, how do I get my revenue share by the end of the year if I trade my token?
What is, let's say, Amazon SEO?
Yeah.
What makes it an SEO versus an ICO?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Let's say that STO it's an equity crowdfunding based on crypto. So you literally buy equity with tokens. So, for example, your company is valuated $10 million. You launch 10 million tokens. I can buy 1% of your company with 1 million tokens.
So it's actually an equity offering.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And okay, so let's say we do real estate developments in Miami or whatever. We've got, let's say, office buildings, paying rents, etc., etc. So what in the securities world was real estate investment trusts, where you had buildings, securitize them, list off the exchange, and whatever income you're generating from the building is passed to the investor. Let's say that day, and that be put as an STO as well. Let's say that this is Malta.
Yeah.
It can be. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You can do your STO in Malta and build houses in Miami.
Yeah. That's what Miami works about.
Yeah, yeah, Miami or Toronto or whatever. But no, yeah, but because houses and real estate business is it's a solid one. So whereas the solid things you can convert in STOs, and the price of STOs is about fluctuating, go up and down according to the real estate market.
Most security for the investors.
What is the security?
Investors can invest with more secure.
So if you look at the hierarchy, you will find IC on the extreme left on ease, and you will find your IPO on the extreme right, and then that's instrument or all those kind of things. And somewhere in middle right, the STO, which is midway right.
This is the reason why I'm asking about that regulatory environment.
Yeah.
Where do you sort of say, okay, I don't want to register SEC registered.
That's the STO version.
I want to do an STO that avoids all that. And where do you cross that
So,
border?
Pushkar, that's why I was my first question. The world is divided into two parts. One is the ICO world, is the STO world. STO world is more who are looked as a good guy with SEC and RBIs of the world, and the ICO which is being flourishing on the eastern, much more on the eastern part of the world. Nothing wrong or right with either of the model, but yes, it's about the regulators who want to control the most of these kind of fundraising instruments. And ICO, has been flourishing much more faster than any other instrument.
Welcome. Welcome.
Yeah, so Abhishek, just to answer your question, there have been cases of reverse ICO where companies went for unlisting and listing on the IC. And there are STO or ICO, whatever. It depends, what is the mandate of the board, how they want to run their company. If they feel like you are much more regulated and they're getting easy money. So there have been reverse ICO cases, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think, thanks. Yeah, sorry. A legal question?
Yeah, I remember.
As you rightly pointed out that real estate in Miami can actually uh, offer through an STO by floating a company in Malta. Right. Say for example, this ICO or say for example STO, and Indian invest. How do you protect the investor protection guidelines and how does it work? Does he actually go for the Miami guidelines? Does he go for Malta guidelines? Or does he go to the Indian public?
You really good question. Who protect the Indian investors from an ICO made in Malta with the real estate in? This is a crypto globalization. So
There's no central, there's no global law, so there has to be some country.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the law should be the Malta law. That is a European one. Um, but who protect the Indian investors to a Malta STOs? Well, it's quite difficult. The audit of KPMG should be.
So, as per the guidelines of the RBI today, all the exchanges have been disconnected with the Indian economy in the banking system. That's the only paper which is available out there in public by government of India, which actually makes you unable to invest in any ICO. So, first of all, you are disconnected. Second, if even if you have to do it, you have to do it through some bank outside India, which is then you are anyway bypassing the Indian law. The Indian law won't protect you. And then where is the destination of the ICU? You will have to go and seek help there. Isn't the whole thing behind blockchain that you're protected because everything is transparent? You are protected by the platform, but what if the company is not doing good or if it is a fake ICO or something of that sort, right? Because it's all happening on Telegram. But you can't have a fake ICO because you have to yeah, you have it on blockchain, but there are
There's people behind blocks.
yeah.
Yeah, in Italy, the blockchain, the first question you made me, in Italy, blockchain took place really, really early because banks are fully, yeah, banks brought about 100 billion euros or something like that. And banks have been evaluated and audited by Standard & Poor's. So if an SEO could rob money like an SEO, like a man, because behind SEO there's a man. But it's really hard because you will see and you will track the money on the blockchain.
In the SEO, like the regular offering, the word offering document, and then there's the
Red herring prospectus. Yeah.
Is there some kind of related version of this?
Yes. It's called white paper, and that is very high in demand. People are looking for experts of writing white papers who can make you believe in this and the art of possibility in white papers. And you will find amazing quality of English and trust built into the white paper. Yes, there is. Yeah,
But KPM can also provide some kind of audit statement that this is an asset, real estate asset.
not yet. Not yet. ST is being evaluated, but not yet. Nothing. That's it.
So all these accounting firms not paid for all of them.
We stay away from crypto, Bitcoin,
SEO.
ICO. Perfect.
Learned a lot today.
Thanks, Pushkar. Thanks, Abhishek. Thanks, our legal guy. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks
so
to
much.
our panelists.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, Ms. Arcaro, and Mr. Casagran. That was quite an interesting session. Now, I would like to call upon stage Mr. Dhiren Patel, BJTI Mumbai Director. and he'll be discussing about blockchain beyond cryptocurrencies.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Slide. Okay, so many of the things have been talked about, and I'm a technical guy. I'm a computer scientist, and we did lots of work in cryptocurrency, cybersecurity, AI, IoT security, and so on and so forth, and in blockchain. Next slide. So, we all know the Bitcoin evolution and a success story, and the basic philosophy behind that is banking the unbanked or debanking all of us. Bitcoin gave control over finance that cannot be seized, frozen, or censored by governments, banks, financial institutions. So this philosophy can come from any old books. However, if you look at the Bitcoin value, what gave the first value to Bitcoin, it was not so good company called Silk Road, which provided uh, the value to Bitcoin from the virtual to real. And then it sustained over a period of almost 9 years on the based on say secure perpetual mining machine with lots of people trying to hedge or invest in Bitcoin with the speculative future, and it has worked like that. And there is a community. Why it is sustaining? Because there is a community for mining, community for validation, community for admin, management, security, folks. Everything is there for Bitcoin blockchain, and that's why it is surviving. Next slide. We have seen that there was a substantial rise for the period of say 6 months. We call it as the Bitcoin rise, a substantial rise from $400 to say $20,000. Next slide. And then there was a golden age. It sustained post 10,000 levels, 10,000 USD levels, Bitcoin value or price. Next slide. And then there was a fall. And we know that every day the price is fluctuating. So this is still rise. If somebody has forgotten, bought some Bitcoin in say 2012 and forgotten, it's still a substantial rise. But if somebody has got into the market in say January 18, sorry, January 17 or 18 rather, it's a huge fall for them. So, there is something called hype, something called reality. It's a speculative cryptocurrency price. And all of us know that the technology ensures that there will be only 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. At the end of the actual minting cycle and so on and so forth, and that it's all the supply and demand game. Currently, Bitcoin circulation is 17 million. So it's probably 3 years from now, it will reach to its full, supply. And then it stops. 21 million and that's it. These are the number of Bitcoins in the world. And that makes, people come with the theory and it says that if this is the only supply, then one day Bitcoin may attain the value of 100K USD. But it is all speculation. Suddenly, 1 year back, people were thinking that this value will be reached in a year. But now, nobody talks about that. People are a little bit shaky. People are a little bit afraid. And, who are the old holders today? Most of the Bitcoins are where? I'm not economist. I'm computer scientist. So what I read and what I look at and what I observe, I realize that they are in China, they are in US, they are in Russia, but all of them are under tremendous pressure of selling. See, certain economies have grown, certain economies have gone pushed up, and to evade the taxes, people have invested in Bitcoin and they become holder and they enjoyed those things. There were the, you know, they were the long-term investors and there are short-term investors. And as a result, people got in and people got out. And sometimes those who have got in at say $18,000, and if they see that it's $4,000 today and tomorrow it become 45 or tomorrow it become 36 also, and that's the problem. So Bitcoin trading has been reduced. Price is reducing. And people are thinking that Bitcoin has come from, say, certain cents to, say, $20,000. They are trying to look at what are the penny coins or the coins which are having a low value. Can it become, high tomorrow? And now some people are taking out investment from Bitcoin and putting into other coins. And that all is giving lots of volatility to the Bitcoin value. However, if you look at very carefully, so on scientific point of view, the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, why he created Bitcoin at the first place? Because we wanted to have a virtual currency or cryptocurrency which cannot be affected by financial institutions, bank or government imbalance all across the world. The vision was a stable currency in the hand of the community. And that was the original philosophy. It is still the functionality is still same, but instead of the stable currency, it is completely unstable currency today. And that's a real great thing that we have to look into and understand, which some of the things I have already told you. Next slide. So this is the yesterday's price, and you see that where Bitcoin was 4,000. This was 2:30 p.m. Yesterday. Go to next slide. And it has increased to 4,264. Yesterday midnight at 1 a.m. when I was trying to look at the price. I don't know what is the price today, but you can see the fluctuation of $250 in terms of 12 hours. Are we able to sustain or are we able to digest this kind of fluctuation? And that is causing some problem. Next slide. So volatility, frequent rise and fall, and trust with respect to fiat currency. Are we losing the trust? Are we getting the trust as a currency or as a commodity? First of all, what do we call Bitcoin? Commodity or currency? So because there are some wallet, there are some organization, there are some stores which allow you to make payment in Bitcoin, but now it has become difficult. Suppose I want to open up a store where you can buy something with Bitcoin. How do I fix up my price? I mean, it is also fairly easy. Price has to be fixed up for a very small window. Like iPhone, say set at the price of $1,100. I would try to say that what its current Bitcoin value, and then I will try to regulate $1,100 with respect to Bitcoin value. But the problem is, unlike airline, today you book the ticket on airline and they give you the window that for 15 minutes these prices are valid. But maybe in 5 minutes the airline say that the prices have increased. It's a bad experience. With Jet Airways, I had for past 2 weeks. They commit that 15 minutes the price will be there. But when you make payment, after 6-7 minutes, they say that there are new price and you have to pay the new price. So it means they fail to honor the bigger window. But in this case, those windows are getting smaller and smaller, and that makes the customers running away, and that's why those stores are not, very well good idea. What are the other issues? So usability and ease of use. Even Bitcoin, as many of the speakers said, that it's difficult to understand private key management, difficult to manage the wallet, difficult to understand the security of wallet. Trading interest is none. People are just storing the value, holding the Bitcoins. But if you look at the actual circulation, though it's known circulation, all money, all Bitcoins are in circulation, but how much are getting, crossing the border from here to there, it's very, very small. So What are the incentive to mine today? Any user cannot enter into Bitcoin space. The reason is there are mining pools. If you enter, if you jump in, probably it's a wastage of your time and energy. And that is the problem. I can call it as a sustainability issue. Incentive to validate. Again, people with the mining pool can do fast block validation than the small players. And there are strict government regulations. Those panelists talked about how Malta, Singapore, USA are friendly and how there are lots of unfriendly countries. Next slide. So, what are the core issues? People are always thinking about blockchain with Bitcoin blockchain in mind, for which a community is existing, for which value is existing, for which circulation of total number of coins existing. And they are trying to look at all those factors into new blockchain, and without understanding that where is the specifically the community is the issue. And that's why somebody said that if Amazon tomorrow coming out with the cryptocurrency or WhatsApp, they will be hugely successful. The reason is they have a community. They can bring those community to do something. However, they have to ensure that they should not get into the complications of understanding technology or using it. So nothing is for small user. There are some gaming hopes like CryptoKitties. Again, it's like a prepaid kind of thing. You pay some, you buy some ether, you pay some money. It's like a lottery coins, and then it's a crowd-funded, thing, and then you get some, rewards. Not all of you get rewards, but those who pursue and do this, those who have a ample time and all those energy, then they can get something. So it's like of a treasure hunt. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So moving forward, we have understood the Bitcoin blockchain, its pros and cons, and we are not very sure about its future. We are currently in shaky period. Of course, it has taken us to the good realization. Those who have just, even to tell you one thing, there was an interesting challenge. We work in cybersecurity also, and we tried to figure out what could be the keys to handle the Satoshi Nakamoto's wallet, because there are close to 1 million Bitcoins still untouched since its creation. Interesting problem, which has a lots of value. So rather than looking at Bitcoin blockchain, now let us focus what blockchain has, which could be used. So blockchain we can visualize as a scientific point of view as a data structure of backlink list of blocks of transactions of records ordered with respect to time and provide temper evident lock. I mean, any lock can be tempered. However, there is a mechanism by which we can immediately understand that it is being tempered. Otherwise, there is nothing which cannot be tempered. Even when people talk about hash function doesn't provide any security. It gives you the sense of data integrity that if somebody change data, it provides us the mechanism by which we detect it. Otherwise, it is very easy to change anything in this world. So it gives us a sense of immutable records, and that is very good for supply chain management. So all the use cases which goes with supply chain management can be very well handled by blockchain technology. Now we have to think about blockchain ecosystem rather than coins. We have to stop thinking about truly decentralized applications. Rather than we have to think about consortium applications, organizational applications. And still there is a lots of potential. Smart contracts. People talked about Ethereum, Solidity, Parity, Python. So many things are there. This is one thing where it can still do lots of scope and opportunities. Specialized use like IoT. In fact, this is for Internet of Things, coin system. 6 or 7 months back, we wanted to do some use case on IoT energy trading. And when we started coding it, we realized that there is no SDK, there is no developer support, there is nothing available. All those things are hype, theory here and there. So, and the problem is even if we implement it, how do we get the community support to ensure that our transactions are validated through the Tangle mechanism? And so that's now, if we look at the classical debt with BitTorrent, Napster, they are also distributed applications. Today, we think about debt and we relate it with blockchain. See, dApps are dApps. Whether you have to use dApp, blockchain or not, it's your call. In fact, somebody talked about Amazon. I think there is a on the next slide, some slide I have quoted it. It's not a blockchain or it's not a decentralized blockchain. Next slide. So many things has been said about the issues, and one of the issues is scalability. So what are the factors which hamper scalability mechanism? Consensus mechanism is one of them. Block generation, production, incentives versus energy consumption, difficulty level, block size, network delay, transaction finalization time, number of block required for confirmation, transaction level confirmation, like new blockchain architectures are coming with the Tangle, Hashgraph, Hyperledger, extension innovation like sharding, main chain, side chain, off chain, plasma, matic, all those things are coming up, which is required actually. And then if we look at the consensus mechanism, there are many. Important is, do we really require one? Do we really require to mimic Bitcoin blockchain, or we want to create a blockchain in which we don't require proof of work? Do we really want to require all transaction, or do we really want to flag bad transaction? That is another question. Currently, to validate the transaction in Bitcoin blockchain, it takes huge amount of time, and that's why the speed 13 for Ethereum, 8 for Bitcoin blockchain. And but we require 10,000s of transactions to be validated in a minute. How do we do that? So we have to, reinvent some of the things. So there are proof of work, there are proof of stake, there are delegated proof of stake, and then there are proof of activity, which is mixed between proof of work and proof of stake. Then there is proof of stake validity, proof of importance, proof of authority, with zero knowledge proof, and then there is artificial intelligence delegated proof of contribution. People are now putting some adjective here and there and creating those proofs. Important is, do we require those things for so-called blockchain? Or first of all, you take one application and look at it, do we require blockchain to ensure it? Without blockchain, it was surviving the world. So the first question is how blockchain can add value to this application. And if at all we want to do that, what makes it valuable? What makes that new design of blockchain valuable? Which consensus protocol? Which kind of, sorry, K by N majority principle? Do we require that or not? All we have to understand. Next slide. Sustainability is another important thing. Bitcoin blockchain has a sustainability currently. However, still it has become volatile, because from 20,000 to 4,000 is not a joke in just 8 or 9 months. So, or 11 months rather. We have to create, whenever we think about application to be converted into blockchain, we have to think about the community to support it, so that we, in true sense, can figure out or showcase that as a blockchain application. So we require ecosystem to support business environment. What is it? Fast onboarding for interconnected client, easy spend usage across the variety of services or dApps, incentive to hold or store coins, incentive to spend coin, incentive to support rolling again. So they talked about music industry. In fact, the revolutionary principles are coming in which, when you create a reputation system for music, that means the artist is releasing a music, you will be asked the task of evaluate it, whether it is a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. So they will provide you to listen it free of cost, and how you participate in the process, they may pay you rather than you pay some money to listen to the music. So it is coming up now, because at the end of the day, the piece of music which has the most likes and very good stars, which is being sold at higher price to larger community. So this kind of thing we have to think about and create a ruling economy and support for them. Rewards and fee, incentive to mine, incentive to validate, incentive to support, contribute. So all those things, if we can put in the blockchain system, new blockchain system or our application, then we can be, it's a guaranteed success. Trust, fraud detection, prevention, formal verification of participating entities, GDPR compliant, privacy versus KYC, AML compliance, forward value, easy exchange, and quality of service. Those are the aspects which we need to look into. Standardization efforts are going on, though people talk about that industry is moving very fast, standardization process is very slow, but still I know that if you think about cyber security and people think about ISO 27000, which is still there since last 20 years. Similarly, for blockchain, we are doing all this effort. The 23244 series is coming up. Next slide. Wherein we have the standard for terminology, standard for privacy, personally identified information protection. We have a standard for security risk, threat and vulnerabilities. We have standard for identity management. We have standard for reference architecture, taxonomy, legally binding smart contracts. And we have been participating in ISO meeting. Mr. Chaudhary has also talked about that. And in fact, in blockchain standardization process, India has jumped in early stages. So instead of we blindly following whether we like it or not, 27,000, this time we want to ensure that whatever we want, let us induct in this 23,000 series, and so that it could be good. Next slide. If we look at the use cases, now forget about Bitcoin blockchain. Let's think about other things. It's smart contracts, legally enforceable smart contract, property registration, land registration, high value asset tracking, construction blockchain, which is a very good field which is coming up. Because construction business by itself has a nature of contracting system, milestone, running bill, outsourcing. All those things are what require in DApps or smart contract. And CBC is coming up like anything. Then World Bank is doing, United Nations is doing Project Bondi, where fund and bond management can be done through blockchain, working across the different countries. And the financial, they want to ensure that the bond issued to a particular country may not be pledged to do some work for other countries. Internal fund transfer, banks are doing that, cross-border money transfer done through consortium, but user himself or herself cannot be able to do anything to it. And that's the problem. So today business use cases are there for the small players. But for small players, until unless social networks providers can jump in, still I cannot say anything. Proxy voting, but supply chain management. Say for example, if you go to last line, wherever we require sustained quality of service, when multi-parties are involved, those applications, if we take it to the blockchain, then that's the best thing. For example, supplying of a milk to hospital where it goes to the newborns. Now that milk has to have all quality checks. If you feed a contaminated milk, which happened 3 years back in Britain, 14 kids child died. So here, you need not to put anything on secret. It should be transparent. It should be visible by everyone that yes, this is the source. This is how it has been pasteurized. This is how it has been, maintained in temperature. This is how it has gone into hospital. Now it is how it is being, going into the kid's mouth. And for that, we need to create those regulations and compliances in place, for which government has to work. Similarly, elite restaurant, airline catering, there is an issue. And farm to kitchen, somebody is doing it, we can call it as a farm to plate. Even now, Walmart is doing. Walmart has everything on safe and blockchain, which ensures that the food that you are buying, I'm not, advocate of food, but say anyway, any food that you are buying, which has come from particular region of China, has been through the necessary cold chain, or by which it has traveled to USA, And this is it's the stack life, and this is how customers are willing to pay premium if they ensure that these products are hygiene, and it gives the value. Next slide. So you look at this, the blockchain for development. There are lots of things, even carbon market, which is also good. That who is so carbon credit, which is environmental sensitive issue, and we need everything. So nobody fraudulent claims should be made. So all those systems where you want to open it out rather than keeping secret, blockchain is the best technology to use. In fact, you look at the security, cyber security perspective. I am a cyber security scientist. Today I am talking against cyber security. The reason in cyber security, even in bank transaction, why you want to keep your transaction confidential? Tell me one simple reason to that, except small privacy reason. But which government doesn't like? If you are doing something, it has to be visible to government. So if we go to the ethics, then there is not a single point by which you want to say that I buy an airline ticket over internet, why my information require confidential? You spread your information out so thin that there is no place to attack it directly. If you make that transaction and if people validate, yes, this is the transaction, that means if anybody tries to change the transaction, it cannot be. And that's it. That's what we want. And that is where it makes it secret. Everybody sees the transaction. That means now, if some dispute arises, so many people can say that yes, this transaction has happened at such and such date and such time, and that's it. So it's whole entirely different perspective by which you have to see centralized, decentralized, permission, semi-permission, private, public, and instead of just sticking to the cryptocurrency blockchains, we need to look at blockchain as as a tool to certain use cases which require, attention. Next slide. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you. Any questions? Generally, I am professor, so we generally spell it out in good manner. Let me talk about what is VJTI. VJTI earlier set up as a Victoria Jubilee Technology Institute in 1887 by British people. It has pioneered country's engineering education and teaching and research. And currently, I am director of the 137-year-old institution, where we do all programs in undergraduate, postgraduate, and PhD, and we do research. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. That was quite an informative session. Now we'll be having another panel discussion with Mr. Utsav Somari, partner at AngelList, Mr. Daniel Steves, and Mr. Mohak Agarwal. Can we have a mic? Two mics actually.
Okay, we're good. Thanks very much, everybody, for being here. We're going to kind of have an informal chat about the constantly changing and confusing space of investing in the crypto and digital world, as well as at the end of a bit of a discussion, hopefully in our region, hopefully, if we have some fun, between us, we'll have some time from the audience as well. So I'm going to start off by making a statement that crypto investment is a different world than it was a year and a half ago. Crypto investment is a place where people go in to put in $1 and walk out with $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000. That will still happen today in some very small instances. Again, I'm expressing an opinion. But I think that the day of those massive gains are different than they were, simply because there's so much repetition in this space, there's so much duplication in this space, and there's so many people using ICOs or STOs or whatever you label them to replace the VC space. So when I'm looking at a business, whether it's investors or buyers, I look at, does it need the blockchain? Does it really need a cryptocurrency? And how will it actually grow and how long will it take them to get there? Right? Now, I don't invest formally. So what we want to hear from you is That's how a traditional non-crypto investor might think. Right? I've been in this space for a long time, so I'm kind of traditional and non-traditional. But I'd like your views to express to an audience who's interested in what's going on in this world today.
Thanks. So, I mean, last year until early 2017, there were lots of ICOs coming. But what changed now is initially ICOs were actually like crowdfunding, but that's not the case anymore. When the ICO comes to the crowdfunding stage, that's like maybe 5% or 7% tokens being sold to crowd. Most of the tokens are being sold to early investors, reaching that 400% bonus or 100% bonus, right? Whereas in early days, we have seen projects like Zeta, which sold completely to the crowd without giving any bonus, without having multiple years, right? And also, what changed was with time. Initially, it started as the ICOs were raising like 10 million, $20 million. Now we have seen some projects which are being valued at $6 billion or maybe $1 billion. Right? So when you don't have a working product, you don't have any adoption, that company doesn't deserve more than $1 billion valuation. Certainly at that point of time.
I want to add one thing to that as well. Is that I was reading an article in LinkedIn. Well, I see almost the same article every week. Saying, "Oh, look at all of these ICOs. People put in $10 and now it's not worth anything." Well, it's not worth anything yet because it's like a VC, which is your traditional view we want to bring into this. The ICO is raising that money, whether it's 200 million, it doesn't matter. Investors, but they're raising that money to spend that money to build over time. So if that was 6 months ago and you've got a 2-year build cycle to get to market, of course the token is going to be worth nothing.
Actually, I think community change was when lots of conventional funds came into crypto segment. So they came with more than $50 million, $100 million of AUM. And what happens is you don't get allocation of more than $1 million a good project, or maybe 2 years. Now they have to find good projects in that way to invest. Or unless they have insanely high idle capital, which they don't want to have. So what they start to do is they start to invest in those projects which weren't like the amazing projects which in the ideal case scenario they wouldn't have invested. Right. But because of having so much idle capital, they are just investing in the projects which doesn't deserve the investment at the first point.
So I'll start off with a quick overview of the market landscape. So how I got into the space, I think I'm assuming that a lot of people are here either trying to learn or they're already experienced, but I'm just going to take the middle ground. So I think in 2016, when everybody got attached to the price, I think that was the feature which got everybody in. It was not a feature, probably a bug, to attract the wrong set of people into this landscape. So 2016 was that. 2017 was the ICO mania, I think, where a lot of these people who made a quick buck in these flipping of these projects reinvested in other projects which were probably not worthy of that investment. So all of this led to a sort of like a giant Ponzi scheme, which is now collapsing based on regulations and all of the crackdowns which are happening. So what happened when everybody realized that this decentralization dream now is probably being centralized again in a very few set of places. Like, I mean, of course, San Francisco is one of the hubs. London's going to be one of their hubs. Malta is, of course, trying to position themselves. So everyone's trying to, again, it's going to be very centralized. And what all of this, the issues around governance and all of that came around. So in 2017, all the suits got in. That's when all the smartest people or the people with access to LP money who wanted access to these opportunities got in. And that's when, CoinList, which is one of our AngelList companies, came up with this document called Simple Agreement for Future Tokens. So you can actually, these VCs were now buying, so all of these, of course, the ICOs were tradable from, say, a day one listing. That was, again, probably a bug, not a feature. So what happened was that now, with this SAPs, you can actually buy into a network and tokens at a discount because you're, of course, committing the project before it's even live as a blockchain product, or the cryptocurrencies are usable as any utility tokens. So you were buying into these projects before they're even out there this thing. So you're, of course, investing in, say, like a white paper, which is a traditional pitch deck version of the cryptocurrency market. So all of this happened. And then I think the world is now, I think the ICO world is definitely on the decline because everybody's realized that, of course, there's going to be people coming into your board meetings just to see how your project is this thing. And the token release schedule is of course going to be dependent on how your project is performing. So all of that happened. So 2017, I think, and 18 was the year of, I think, stable coins. Stable coins was a very interesting mechanism. Area which is now, of course, attracting too much attention. There is stable coin every day coming out now. So So I run a crypto fund as well, which is backed by some of the best tech angels in India. They all wanted access to these pre-sale projects. So we invested in Orchid, Basecoin, Definity, Origin, a bunch of other ones. So
I want to jump in there because there's a concept that both of you have touched on, which is a traditional investment concept of diversification, right? So I've seen more than one crypto fund out there that has maybe the top 10 cryptos, right? Because if you buy stock markets, you buy Indian Telephone and Telegraph, and you buy Tata, and you buy this, and you buy that, a bunch of different industries and sectors. If you do that in crypto, it doesn't help because they all follow the waves and ebbs and flows of Bitcoin. But we're seeing those. So not as a plug, one of the products I'm working with is meant to fix that, right? To provide some diversification, because the way you guys are talking about traditional investment isn't the way our audience does. Because our audience doesn't look for $51 million projects, right? Our people that are looking into getting into crypto and dipping their toe, they're looking for one or two maybe that they need to know that it's good. And sadly, they go to places on the web that gives them opinions that are not necessarily the good ones or the right ones or the honest ones. I think somebody was talking about ICO bench earlier. You mentioned also about how we were talking about the way that the raises are occurring and ICOs being dead from last year. And I'm going to disagree with that, as I did when we were talking a little bit earlier, because actually the numbers this year exceed last year's. I think the intelligence of the investor has gone up. I think the nose sniffing for the scams has improved, right? And I think the ones that are getting invested in are probably a little more to point. And they're not all ICOs, of course. We'll just use that as a generic term for the crypto, whether it's a security token or not. But do you not feel that there's more knowledge that you can pass from your investor's perspective as a professional investor to a consumer investor? And the reason I'm asking, it goes back to the first talk on the day, the young lady whose name I can't remember, sorry. The first talk on the day, they were talking about the perceptions of crypto and the risks and the dangers. And we are not all equipped to make large and broad investments. So help our crowd.
So I was watching an A16Z presentation yesterday by one of their partners, and they famously showed a slide which mentioned that in 93, 95, when the internet was still being sort of widely circulated to be the next big thing, the distribution of traffic on internet was very limited, and it was concentrated to mostly the DARPA net. And then came along HTTPS and SMTP, which literally changed the whole, and they were, when the internet started in the first few years, they were literally less than 3% of the traffic. So we're probably at that protocol stage where we don't know what's going to win in this stage. But some of the interesting projects are, of course, now trying to create awareness. I think any crypto project has to be, based on strong crypto economics. It's anybody who solves a large crypto problem needs to figure out how the community building is also being part of that. So now, actually, some of the sophisticated projects are actually asking their investors to run staking, have a staking investment as well, or even run nodes. So that's one of the requirements they're letting their investors in for, of course, offering a discount. So it's now come to a phase where sophisticated investing is happening, like you mentioned. Of course, all the scams and stuff are slowly creeping away because they've lost the financial incentive. But definitely seeing more sophistication come in the space.
So at Bullfetch Capital, we analyze any project very differently from the crowd, right? Because we believe that in order to make sufficient gains, you have to be always ahead of the crowd. So even our analysis system has been very controversial because most of the people like to invest in a project which is very hyped. We are mostly invested in always like under-hyped projects. This year we invested in Tomo Chain, which is very under the radar. Then Holo Chain, they were struggling to raise money, but in the end they raised completely and did pretty well. and in the third quarter we invested in Argo. So what we do is uh, in every quarter we first find any good project that can give us substantial gains, and then we diversify our money. Until and unless we find that one project, we don't diversify. And when we look at any project, so when I analyze any team, I don't look at the higher team. I look at the co-founders, founders, and advisors. Because what has started happening this year was most of the ICOs just hired bunch of guys from some companies on contract basis, and after the ICO is over, you won't find those guys on the website. They were not there to do any work. They were just there to get their tokens in exchange for their picture, right? And also, what I see is there are a couple of companies who have already done any ICO, and now they are doing a second ICO with a very similar idea as first. That's a big no-no for us, because when you see that this guy is not focusing on the first project itself, then what's the use of second project? And then you should also look at the fully diluted market cap and see how much tokens are being given to the public. If the company or the foundation is still holding the majority of the tokens, then that doesn't make much sense.
Well, those are all really good, interesting points from both of you. And when I take a look at the companies that I've been advising along the way, the problems that they have, you guys have touched on every single one of them. Part of it's convincing investors, but part of it is actually having a viable product. So let's just forget about blockchain for a second, right? I've been working in the startup sector for 10 or 15 years from the very beginning of fintech in London, mostly by accident. I'm an independent, so I had some spare time, so I started working in a couple of accelerators and doing some mentoring, and I had a really good time, and I learned a lot from it. And you learn how young people think, which is good for an old guy too. But the way that the startup founders think is somehow the way that the ICO founders are thinking, or the STOs, is that so many of them are going to save the world, and they expect you to believe that. I was in Malta, and I was handed a glossy, non-recyclable flyer by a young lady telling me that every $2 I spent would save the rainforest, except for the glossy piece of paper that she just killed the rainforest with, right? I get approached 20 times a week to invest or to advise. My time and this stuff is mostly what I invest. And when I take a look at the projects that are coming to me, most of them they don't have a need for the blockchain, or they do have a need for the blockchain, but they don't need their own crypto, right? Are you often coming across businesses that you think, hey, that looks like a good business, but it's not a blockchain business? And are you telling them that? Are they listening? I'm just wondering how it works from their side, because I think that also tells the story to our audience who are trying to find their way through this minefield.
So I think, as with any technology, we probably overestimate the impact in the shorter run and underestimate what's going to happen in the longer run. But that being said, a lot of the projects just need a centralized team working on it. It doesn't need a decentralized distributed ledger technology behind it. I do, of course, come across a lot of projects like that, but whenever you tell the team, they're mostly brushing you out that way. So, I mean, that being said, there are literally, I think, probably 1,000 cryptographers in the world who can actually make a correct assessment of how the project or the network will be built. So that being said, I mean, it's up to anybody to try it, because we're still waiting for that iPhone moment of crypto to come and prove everybody wrong.
Well, the difference there is the iPhone is actually something people could hold in their hand and use. Whether you're an Apple fan or an Android man, it doesn't matter, right? But with the crypto, that's a very confusing type of a thing. If you're investing money in crowdfunding in a business and you're going to get a special high-tech backpack early, that's one thing. But you're putting money into something for a very long term and you don't really understand it. So saying only a few people can really evaluate them makes it really difficult for investors. And sorry, the last point, the reason I mentioned the young lady's talk earlier, I'm sorry for calling you that, if that's the wrong thing to say, was she was talking about consumer adoption. Or adoption, and I believe consumer adoption is the critical thing. When you get that Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain, iPhone moment, yes, that will be one of the big things. But we're also looking at ways that people can
invest safely and make a profit.
So, I mean, there are so many issues involved in this whole public-private key phenomena that, I mean, custody is one of the biggest ones. I think we've been managed to raise LP capital because most of the people don't want to deal with dealing or storing their keys and with themselves. I mean, there's no way you can recover a password like you do on Facebook or Google for this. So it's still, I mean, we're still figuring out the basics of this before it even comes to a stage where consumer adoption is one. I think stable coins, the regulated stable coins was probably one attempt at that. But even then, they have their own issues, like the Tether, of course, having their I mean, transparency
and it's not an investment.
Yeah,
and it's a trading tool.
Yeah, but that's how you get people to at least start using it, right? Because the volatility doesn't make Bitcoin or Ethereum as a payment mode. It just, I mean, it's a technology which is there. It's probably at best a speculative digital gold at the moment.
Okay, and same question.
Yeah, of course, we do see a lot of projects which doesn't need a blockchain. And adding to Utsa's point, there are some projects or some ideas that doesn't need to be decentralized. For example, I have been pitched projects like we are building a decentralized Airbnb or decentralized Uber. I don't see any point at the current moment that you, for example, the driver adoption. Who is going to do that? There needs to be a central party which handles that. And sometimes they just pitch about that Uber is charging 30% from the drivers and we are not going to charge that. And like how? Just by implementing blockchain, but your costs are not decreasing. Everything that they are doing, you will do, and then how will you decrease your cost? And the same way, decentralized Airbnb, that doesn't make much sense. If I want to stay in a hotel, and if there is one hotel which is available easily by giving my fiat currency or Bitcoin or Ethereum or making just payment in crypto, why would I buy that specific coin to stay in that hotel instead of just making the payment in crypto, right? Whereas yeah. Whereas there are lots of other use cases which actually need the use of blockchain. For example, I mean, donation funds is one of the most interesting use case. Recently, I saw one project. So there is a farmer who has two hen, and every time you put a donation of 10 cent or 20 cent, she gets some food. Yeah, and it's it's live streamed.
Using the blockstream to ransom the chicken for food. I like it. It makes more sense than CryptoKitties. So we're going to go to the audience in just a second and get some questions for a few experts to give us some feedback. I'm still back at the space where I'm a techie, right? I've been in this business for 38 years. When somebody used to come to us and say, oh, we have a problem, can you solve it? And then the techies would figure out a way to solve it. In the last half of my career, it's become an awful lot more, I have a problem, please solve it with this technology. So we have the same problems with Bitcoin, with blockchain and with cryptocurrency, but it comes back to centralized or decentralized. It depends on what you're trying to do, right? You don't just use tech, you use tech as a tool. I do mostly business strategy now, right? From the technical background of using tech the right way. So I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here. You can't preach that centralized is the future or it will die and it has to be decentralized because it will depend on those use cases. Okay, so are we good to open up to the audience for a few questions? Do we have enough time? I'll go with a yes. And can somebody help with the microphones? Please.
My name is Dinesh Kumar from Infolog magazine. The name crypto and the blockchain, they have a lot of mental blocks in people. So what is being done to simply carry home the idea as to how blockchain will solve probably all the problems of the world. So, 1, 2, 3, if few things are told, that it is easy, it is safe, it is not going to be notebandi in Indian context. So how could you say 1, 2, 3 simplistic ways as to how the people should start using that?
Okay, let me jump in briefly first, because something we were talking about earlier. Blockchain is the motorway. right? If you want to get from city to city and there's no motorway, there's no way to do it. Blockchain gives us that. Bitcoin, CryptoKitties, everything else, they're vehicles on the motorway. Some products that are being built are on-ramps and on-ramps. Some of them are toll gates. Some of them are service stations and rest areas. Those are all of the products, whether they're centralized or decentralized. The reason that blockchain is going to make a difference is it becomes something that people actually get confused by. It's trustless. My German colleagues, my company is based in Germany, they didn't like the sound of trustless because they thought translating it to German meant you can't trust it. No, what it means, the pure English version is, I don't have to trust him or him. I have to trust this thing. And this is where hashing and proof of stake and all this other technical stuff that is really irrelevant to most of us comes into play, right? It is an immutable version of the truth. That is the holy grail of IT that we've been seeking in the 38 years I've been in the business. That is why the blockchain is something special. Yes, people can use that and mess it up. Yes, people have taken over 51% of blockchains and corrupted them and fixed it. And those things are being noticed and fixed. It's a nascent technology. It's not all going to be perfect yet. But where would India be without the motorways?
Thank you. Yeah, also, I would like to add that there's this notion that blockchain can solve everything. That notion is actually incorrect because there are some things which are not meant to come on the blockchain, right? Think of it, one use case, very interesting use case is, let's say a music composer comes to you and he gives you a recording of a song and he's like, okay, just hear it. And it's a digital song. Currently, if I give you a song, you can transfer it to anyone and you cannot tell me about it, right? And you can still say, I haven't transferred this song to anyone. But now we have a digital system where if you can maintain the atomicity of that if that it's not like it can have multiple copies. If you transfer that song to someone, then it goes, you lose the ownership of it, right? So that's one of the very interesting use case which didn't exist before and which can exist in the future. And also I'm very positive towards the content side of it. For example, Wikipedia is the largest content site in the world, and you can edit, you can write anything on Wikipedia, you can edit anything on Wikipedia. Of course, by having lots of positive edits, you have the power to do that. But that type of use case doesn't need a middleman, right? And still can conquer the world.
When it actually works, the real end user will never even know what it's even working. Like something like BitTorrent, right? I mean, when you use torrents to download anything, yeah, exactly. So you just front end would remain the same for you. I mean, behind that, the magic will happen, of course, and that the tech people are working hard to solve that.
Just like everything else in the computer space, right? What we see in front of us takes a lot of work to make it look so pretty, but nothing like the work it is to make it work behind the scenes. So yeah, it's a land registry solution. I'm working with a company in Nigeria, land registry, right? So your ownership is marked and can't be changed. This was started by a friend of mine who bought 10 acres of land outside of his mother's village in central Nigeria from the local chieftain, only to find out 2 years ago that the local chieftain died and the son decided he wanted to keep everybody's land. So he did, because there's no proof, there's no record. This is in every emerging economy, every frontier economy, you have these problems. The reason I mentioned this land registry solution is because they've just realized, after me telling them for a year and a half, they need the blockchain, they don't need a token, right? So they've come up, they're working on a different mechanism, and they decided that's not the way to raise their money because it's a 4-year point for anybody to break even, let alone make a profit. So that's not an easy sell to investors. But land registration on the blockchain where that chief can't change that record and can't take away your ownership of that piece of land. These are the things that not only is
Actually,
important.
I want to contradict on that part. So I have seen lots of times that people are very positive towards blockchain, but very anti towards cryptocurrency or a token. To my belief, the way I see it and research it, the both are very tightly coupled together, and a blockchain cannot exist without a token. It can be a private blockchain, but that doesn't make any sense. That's like in the internet era, when every company said that internet is not going to do anything. It's the intranet that will survive. But
You're not wrong. The token is the grease for the blockchain motor that won't move without grease. But it doesn't need to be yet another token. Right, it can use existing tokens that are valid, like an ether or what have you, depending on the model that you're working on, and if it needs to be a stable coin. Because again, those people that are using it are going to put their credit card into the system and pay for their land registration with fiat and have no idea the blockchain stuff that's behind it. So we should probably go to another question.
Hi, this is Ajay Sachdeva. I've been to the crypto trading from last couple of years. And of late, what I've seen is that forex is the crypto is getting traded into forex, right? Foreign exchange, and the size of the markets are quite different. See, the crypto market is almost 2 billion, and that is $6 trillion. So, if that market influences crypto markets, right? Because forex has both way traders. You can put it on a lower end also, top end also. So that's a both way trading. So how good or how bad it is for the crypto industry and of course for the blockchain emerging as an emerging industry. If forex dominates crypto, because that's there getting traded in forex also. So if forex, a $6 trillion market dominates a $200 billion market, so how good or bad it is for the crypto market? That's my question.
So I think there are different use cases of crypto. Money is, of course, one of them, and cross-border transfers is one of them. But there are cryptocurrencies are a whole bunch of other things as well, like digital collectibles, which are non-fungible, then utility tokens. So it's going to solve a lot more issues than even, they say, the 6 trillion market of Forex. But, I mean, it's definitely not the same to compare it apple to apple. I mean, crypto is just solving money as a very little portion of it, but there's a whole bunch of other use cases to look at it. So,
well, it looks like a drop in the bucket when you compare crypto and Forex. Crypto used to be an empty bucket. It's getting filled up with Forex. That balance is going to change over time. The final answer may not be Bitcoin or IOTA or Ether or XRP. It might be QQ73 that we've never heard of yet. But crypto is not going to go away. It is changing. And the amount of people that are going to be putting their fiat currency, I mean, there's a finite amount of money, except when governments print more. But the balance will change, and you will see probably over the next 10 years coming closer to some sort of a medium level between them. And I would foresee over time that there'll be more currency in crypto than there will be in Forex, simply because it's better managed over time when it's properly regulated and properly accepted.
Also, like in the last 10 years, crypto has overperformed any asset that you know, stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities, metals, right? Whatever. And we see lots of institutions also coming, ICE is coming, Fidelity is coming. The thing is, whatever has been done till now in the last 10 years is going to lay groundwork for next 3 years for these institutions to jump in. So we will definitely see a lot of this market cap increasing a lot with adoption coming from the institutions as well as from retail investors.
Money is the oldest religion which is probably out there, which has united people for thousands of years. And crypto has achieved like this much in 10 years. Imagine what it can do in the longer run. So it's, I mean, early days, but it's moving along in the right direction, I think.
Nice lively bunch. Thanks, everybody.
Hello? Hi, I'm the young lady you keep talking about. My name is Kathy.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I just had 2 questions for funds. The first is, what are some of the more mature valuation models that people are exploring? Because I think one of the things that has been very confusing about the crypto space is that there aren't strong valuation metrics or valuation models at the protocol level, at the stablecoin level, at the utility token level. We saw consensus mechanisms that even at venture rounds were valued at $300 million. So what is expensive? What is not expensive? How do we pass on that to retail investors? So that's question number 1. And question number 2 is, it seems like there are many funds with different mindsets, right? There's hedge funds, there's venture funds, and how are investors trying to better calibrate the expectations of projects, right? Because I have a lot of very smart friends who started great projects with funds that they thought would have more of a venture mindset, right? More of a support, long-term horizon, et cetera. And some of them were traditional venture funds, some of them were crypto hedge funds, et cetera. But then we saw behavior that was more, instant liquidity, drop off to the retail market, very little support, funds that were investing in 50, 100 projects at one time, absolutely no ability to offer those value add services to those projects. And the entrepreneur is the one that gets stuck, right? Because now you've essentially liquidated to a bunch of retail investors, and the entrepreneurs are there and responsible over a long term horizon. So the first thing is, what is the valuation model and how do we pass on that knowledge to the general public? And the second is, how do funds better transparently disclose their position and their thesis to entrepreneurs?
How about each of you to take one? Leave it for the experts on the investment side.
Valuation of a network is, how traditional investing is also done. It's literally just demand and supply and the market conditions. If there are more people willing to pay you that price, then of course that project is going to be highly valued. It's literally just a world where demand and supply defines that price. Of course, unless you're an entrepreneur who has multiple exits or you're a super strong photographer, then you can of course charge whatever you want as investors to come into your project. So yeah, demand and supply would be the only way which is going into this black box to determine the price of a certain network or a token. But coming to that, also some of these smarter projects are actually locking up investors for 12 months, 18 months, 20 months, 24 months after the network has launched for them to not instantly flip it out. And that's actually bad because all of these tokens, projects have raised like say 2% or 5% of the network from this single investor. Like A16Z owns like 15% of Maker now, which is, huge governance power in just one centralized fund. So they cannot, they've been locked in for not dumping these tokens onto the market. And of course, in the end, the retail investors will probably lose out. So the smarter projects are doing it much smarter. So I think there needs to be definitely more sort of public education towards how the funds should treat this, and of course how the project should raise also from these funds.
Yeah, so I would say it's a learning phase for lots of IC projects as well. Till 2017, there were no lockups in any project. What we have seen in 2018 is lots of projects are putting lockups for early investors. Theoretically, it seemed very practical to put lockups that you won't see any dumping. But instead, what happened was, I remember two projects right now, Eden Chain and Quark Chain. They had monthly lockups up to 2 years. Eden Chain had for 5 months. But what happened was, lots of funds, the big funds, they participate post TG, the token generation event, when the tokens are trading live on the market. And instead of lockups working positively for them, it worked very negatively for them, because of the point that when you have every month, you know that on 16th of every month, this much chunk of tokens are going to be unlocked. The demand is not going to increase, but supply is going to increase. So what I'll do is I'll participate when all the lockups are complete, and then the trading volume declines. So Quarkchain had lockups for 1.5 years. Now they have delayed all the lockups until 2021, starting from, if I remember correctly, June 2019. And Eden Chain, they announced, I think 4 days back, that instead of having monthly lockups for next 3 more months, we are going to give all the tokens right away. We'll see all the dumping at the once, but then we can positively look towards the upward movement in the price. And the other way that the entrepreneurs, crypto entrepreneurs, didn't work smartly was they kept holding ETH reserves for a very long time, because they were also speculating on the price that we have raised 10 million. Like if DAO has raised 20 million, now they are sitting on 400 million, we can do the same. But that didn't happen. Instead of focusing on their project, they were speculating on price. The right thing to do was to convert majority of their funding into fiat straight away, because when they raised funding, they obviously had models that this money is gonna give us survival for next 2 years or 3 years. So why not stick to that? Why hold all your tokens in ETH or Bitcoin reserves?
It's a very valid point, and this is one of the ones I keep looking at, is no traditional investor holds everything in one company, unless maybe he's the owner of the company, and in which case he's still making a mistake, because diversification is what you must do. Crypto diversification is difficult. If I had $100 worth of Bitcoin last month, I would have about $45 or no, $60 worth of Bitcoins this month. Next month it might be more, next following month it might be less. This is something that doesn't bring confidence to anybody to invest. So when you combine that with the number of scams, when you combine that with all of the negative press, which you have to remember, it's companies like the car companies were telling the public that seatbelts weren't saving lives. The tobacco companies were telling the public that cigarette wasn't killing you, right? Why would any company, whether it's doing an ICO or an IPO, tell the future that you put your dollar in now and it'll be worth $10 maybe in about 10 years, right? So there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of confusion. There's fear of missing out is balanced by the fear of losing it all, which leaves a lot of people in the middle, which means doing nothing. Crypto is not going to go anywhere until you people in this room, the people in the hotel lobby, the people having dinner in the restaurant tonight, until they all have crypto. And I personally don't believe that getting every restaurant or hotel or vendor to accept crypto is necessarily the right answer. They accept Visa and MasterCard, right? My crypto and other cryptos that I've advised, you'll be able to spend it with a Visa and a MasterCard. So I don't care if Aloft Hotel takes Bitcoin or not. I can tell my wallet to use this card from the Bitcoin balance and pay that way.
Already a lot of cards available.
Exactly. Yeah. But again, that's one of these consumer adoptability factors, right? If it's you have to get a new card or pay in a certain crypto, then it becomes very difficult. Why does everybody in India use the rupee? It's pretty easy, because everybody takes the rupee, right? I come here with euros. I took my taxi from the airport to the hotel with euros, right? If I go down the street to buy dinner in a little restaurant, I'm not going to expect them to take euros. And if I do, I'm not very much of a traveler. If I'm an investor who expects the world to take the coins that I've invested in, or better yet, it's just like in most of these cases, we're buying stocks in companies that aren't publicly listed. Now we are seeing in the startup space for shares and in the startup space for coins, we are seeing third-party exchanges that allow these transactions to occur, but it gets pretty tricky as well. And the fungibility of the coin remaining, fungibility being a simple concept that every single coin is identifiable from, not identifiable from the next. They are all equal and the same. So I can't give you a coin that's worth 5% more than his or has special characteristics. Just like the euro in my pocket or the rupee in your handbag, it's the same thing. It's a perceived and recognized thing. That's what we need in the consumer market, is for people to be able to use this. I've got Nigerian bank accounts, I've got German bank accounts, I've got British bank accounts. Sadly, none of them are particularly full, but I have the different currencies in the different places, and that's what people in today's world want. That's what we need to be able to deliver them from this industry to make our approach into this type of digital assets actually valid and viable for the future. The tech is great. Internet, its biggest gain at the very beginning, as everybody knows, was pornography, right? Fortunately, there's not a lot of call for porn with blockchain, so it won't be the answer here. But however, whatever took us to get the internet to where it is today, thank you, porn, because it's done something magical for us, right? Even if Bitcoin disappears and becomes a dinosaur in the next 12 months or 12 years, it doesn't matter. It's still whoever Satoshi is, they've done a brilliant invention that we can now make better.
We have only 2 last questions, and then we'll go for lunch. I've got this question to Utsav. Utsav, you mentioned about SAFT, which is a simple agreement for future tokens. I would like to know, do you think that SAFT is a complete document by itself on the basis of which you can make an investment? Or more correctly put, do you think that, or what are the documents that you actually execute while investing in an ICO? And I've got another question for the panel.
Sure. So SAFT is, of course, one of the more popular pre-sale mechanisms for signing an agreement. But of course, while making an investment, there are 1,000 other documents that you need to review. And some of that, of course, the more public ones are the white papers. Then there's, of course, you need to do your own technical review and, of course, be comfortable with the team. Then there's, of course, if it's a public offering or a private offering, there's a private placement memorandum. So you need to check a whole bunch of things before investing. SAFT is just a part of what you sign. What you sign on to. But there are a whole bunch of legal documents that you need to vet and, of course, make your own assessment of the project before investing. And none of this should be treated as investment advice. I think we should just put it out there.
That's a very good point. Nobody is giving investment advice because they don't want to get sued. I'm
Just one last.
I want a quick response to the SAFT though. It's like a non-disclosure agreement, right? If I sign a non-disclosure agreement with this investor who's worth 5 bags of money, and I decide that he's actually stolen my, or I think he's stolen my idea, the NDA is only so good as the trust between us. I've got 1 small bag of money, he's got 5 large bags of money. He's going to beat me in court every time. Can I even afford to endeavor to try to fight that? So the SAFT is the similar thing. It all comes down to the trust and the belief and all of those other documents.
And the question to the panel is that what is it that ICO or crypto funds are trying to solve, which traditional VC funds have not been able to solve?
It's a different asset class. So I think anybody who's your LP will probably have a separate set of his portfolio allocation theory. So you're only managing a little bit of his money based on what he's allocating to that asset class. And of course, investing in crypto projects requires a special set of expertise and of course access to these projects as well. So, crypto funds are trying to solve basically an asset allocation problem in a whole bunch of larger scheme of things.
दस दस पे तो बंद नहीं होगी वीडियो तो बंद कर दी फिर मैंने फिर क्या किया जाए नहीं अब क्या है क्या है मेरे दूसरे फोन से दे दो फोन चाहिएगा दूसरा फोन अब ये व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप पे है ना डीजीएस पे उसमें है लिंक इसे चार्जिंग पे लगा दो यार कितने ऊपर बैटरी खत्म 10 74 पे नहीं करा ठीक है वाईफाई में चल रहा है लगाते तो फोन करवा दो यार लेके फोन ले जाना इसका लगा देना लेना भाई लगाना कौन सा है लगा दो मैं लगाता हूँ है कैमरा कहाँ गया इसका कैमरा खुलता है कैसे खुलता है मेरे लिए भी हाँ मेरे लिए हाँ तुमने तो थोड़ी तो मांगी है पैनल डिस्कशन चल रहा है वो सामने लिख के लगा तो है मैंने डाल रखा है खोलो हाँ ये सेंट्रलाइज फीचर नहीं है नहीं वो मेरा माउस दे दो प्लीज थैंक यू वाइट कलर की हाँ दे दो प्लीज मेरे को ये चाहिए अरे नहीं है चार्जर चाहिए था देखना कोई ना छेड़े इतनी था नहीं मांगा था तो मेरा दिमाग नहीं चल रहा ऐसा लग रहा है मैं ब्लैंक हो गई हूँ पकड़ भी नहीं रहा थैंक यू
So you may know
सामने से बुलाया पापड़ खा रहे मैंने किया तो कुछ साइड पे आ रहे मेरे में प्रशांत
Let's meet a bro. प्रशांत को बुलाओ खाना खाने जा रहा है फोटो नहीं भाई सॉरी जाओ जाओ चलो खा के फूक के अरे बंद हो गई है जाओ मैं मैंने टू किसी को अपना ये दिख रहा है अच्छा हाँ ठीक है हाँ ठीक है ठीक है ठीक है तुम अपना ये देख लो अगर तुम्हें ये देख ले कि क्या है हाँ तुमने प्रेस का लाइव कर दिया जाओ जाओ फटाफट जाओ कहाँ जाऊँ उसको किसी लैंडस्केप में डाल ये ले लैंडस्केप कर दिया लैंडस्केप
comes in states because it's solving a problem. Right? We have multiple problems that you gave us in a couple of sentences based on everything from quantitative easing and money printing through to different. And that's not an illogical thought because today we have the tech to do that, the impetus to do that, and the problems to solve. Is it perfect yet? No. Is it going to go further and get more perfect? Let's hear what they think.
इसमें आवाज आ रही है सुनो 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 इसका रोटेशन ऑन है
Everything in my world becomes a hybrid before it becomes something else. So the bucket dripping from Forex into Bitcoin scammy, walk away because there's another 100 or 200 or more to look at. We're bucking the trends with my business that we're going to go out and do the public and private sale at the same time, right? It's available to everybody. Now, if you put in $1 million and you put in $20, you'll probably get a better bonus, right? But we're making it accessible across the board, which I've been advised by several different people not to do it that way, and I don't care. I think we just want a slightly different approach. I've seen ICOs that are doing Dutch auctions, reverse auctions for the prices, which is just to confuse people, right? All of this stuff out there is just smoke and mirrors. Tell me what your business is. Tell me what it does. Tell me what it fixes, why people want to spend money on it, just like any other business. Then understand the business makes sense. See if blockchain and crypto make sense. If it all still adds up and these people seem real and they've got the right practical experience, and at least one of them is more than 18 years old. No offense to young people, but gray hair sometimes has value from experience. Our business, I'm a crypto advisor of sorts. One of my co-founders is one of the top ones in the world, but all of the other guys, I mean, they're marketing people, they're bankers, they're a guy with construction and mining background, right? We're bringing in the expertise of the business that we need, not just a bunch of techies sitting in a room working together. So if that business doesn't make sense, when you go through the advisors, like you said, and if you look at that advisor and you happen to see that he's advising 114 projects, you can probably assume he's not spending a lot of time on each. If you look at an an advisor who's working on 5, that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, of course, it shouldn't be the full-time job of an advisor to advise projects, right? He should be some industry leader or market expert, or maybe doing his own project and then advising 2 or 3 projects, or at max 5. But if he's advising 100 projects, that's his full-time job to just advise projects and may not spend any time with any project.
Look at it, the skill of these people. If I wanted advice about a startup, it's not Mark Zuckerberg that I would go to. No offense, he's got a good startup, did quite well with it, if I recall, but he's done it once, and he might have just got lucky. That doesn't mean he's a startup expert. It means he had a great idea and it worked right. Right? Don't go to a serial entrepreneur who has 20 startups that didn't succeed. Try to find somebody in the middle, right? Somebody that's exited once or twice, maybe, or somebody with good, solid industry credentials behind them. Look closely at the people that you're putting your money into, because, frankly, you get to see them a lot closer than you do any faceless corporate. So I think we're probably really over our time already. I think we've covered most questions from the audience. We'll be around, available to grab us during lunch and stuff as well. And now I think we got to get off the stage because people are probably hungry. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Now we'll carry forward for the lunch and we'll meet here at 2:30. Okay? Thank you.